Part 57. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Enchenmi San. Chapter 587. Kaylan felt a bone-chilling chill running from the top of his head to the soles of his feet. He thought the other party was just talking nonsense, but he didn't expect that everything the other party said was true. Kaylan originally had a pair of king bombs in his hand, but now when he needed to use this pair of king bombs, he turned over his whole cards and found that they turned into verses 3. Is it because cognition is distorted by memes? No, his power is far greater than memes. Memes cannot interfere with the holy word, just like the sacrificial ceremony cannot be interrupted. That can only mean one problem, that great God is unwilling to lend his power to himself at this time. Kaylan hasn't even revealed the purpose and price yet. I don't know why, even though this result was fatal, Kaylan felt a sense of relief in his heart for no reason. It was as if it would be a better thing if the god didn't respond to him. The energy shield was so transparent that it was almost impossible to detect it with the naked eye. The microfan that dissipated heat for the shield generator immediately stopped working after making a hysterical buzzing sound. The temperature was over 100 degrees below zero. In the space, the air pump and metal heat pipes of the entire cooling device were melted directly, and the bright red metal liquid overflowed directly from the gaps in the armor. It has to be said that the people in the equipment department have spent a lot of money on this suit of armor. If it had been replaced by an ordinary small shield generator on the market, it would probably have exploded by now. The shield generators manufactured by Alpha Civilization are also divided into several grades. For example, if Layton is installed in his own robotic arm, it can only be regarded as a mid to lower grade shield generator. The market price of the top-level shield generators, even small ones, is already on par with battleship-level shield generators. It was this price difference of dozens or even hundreds of times that bought Kaylan just a few seconds. The price difference of hundreds of times in exchange for these few seconds is not cost-effective at all, but if these few seconds can become the key to a battle, then no matter how expensive this thing is, it is still worth it. If the holy word can take effect, Kaylan does have the ability to reverse the entire situation in these few seconds, but the premise is that this thing must take effect. Just as the clone said, the great God may be watching here. Kaylan is a chess piece on his chessboard, and the seraph after the fusion of the clone and the Yinglong egg is also a chess piece on his chessboard. Playing chess with the left hand and the right hand, the player will naturally not favor either side. But is he really not taking sides on the chessboard? If there was no favoritism, then why couldn't Kaylan interrupt the fusion ceremony between the clone and Yinglong's egg? At least, I shouldn't be allowed to die here like this. Kaylan murmured. As soon as he finished speaking, the top of the hall exploded, and a beam of light that was countless times more solid than the energy shield fell from the sky, directly covering the seraph. Seraph's wings retracted, and at the same time, Ian's energy shield disappeared. Kaylan was stunned. He looked up and saw that the entire underground ice house from the first to the fifth floor had been blasted through. He could even see the ice above the West 2nd District. Dome. What is going on? Kaylan looked at the beam of light that imprisoned the seraph with some disbelief. He thought it was the power from the great god, but when he looked carefully, he found that this beam of light seems to be formed after being restrained by an energy shield. Is this support from the undead crew? They removed the energy shield covering the entire contaminated area, blasted it into the underground ice house, and trapped the seraph. Hiss, hiss. A burst of electricity came from the communication channel. With the disappearance of the large shield, the originally unusable wireless communication channel also returned to normal. Schroeder? Schroeder, Linkiming? What on earth is going on? Have you turned off the energy shield outside? However, it was not Schroeder and Linkiming who responded to Kaylan, but an unfamiliar voice. This voice is very young, younger than Schroeder, Linkiming, even Kaylan. It sounds like a young adult at best. Can you hear me? Lucky guy. Who are you? Kaylan asked subconsciously. You can call me Pen. Pen, Ian's heart moved, and a male image with goat horns and hooves appeared in his mind. Are you, the 15th seat of the undead crew, the devil? Bingo, Pan said happily. His personality seemed completely different from other members of the undead crew. He was really like a big boy who had just grown up. My mind is very smart. I guessed it right away. I thought you would spend more time. Except for the people in the crisis management department, the only people who can access this communication channel are you, the immortal crew. Kaylan said, if you can you tell me what is going on? As you can see, Pan's tone was very brisk. The crew doesn't want the Pope candidate to die in the underground icehouse, so they decided to provide you with a little help. It happened that the shield happened some time ago. The interference device of the weapon has made breakthrough progress, so we decided to take advantage of this opportunity to test this new weapon. The new weapon in Pan's mouth naturally refers to the energy shield after the contraction. If Seraphis 6 wings were not trying their best to resist the shrinking light curtain, the entire energy shield should be able to turn into a slender and solid beam of light. It can be an unbreakable shield or an indestructible spear. Is this how you plan to kill it? No. The energy shield alone cannot kill Seraph. Its power comes from cognition. As long as it firmly believes that its energy will never be exhausted, then it can always compete with this beam of light, even it is tearing apart the light beam. For us, the power of the energy shield has been stretched to its limit. In this state, the light beam can only last for 5 minutes at most. Power comes from cognition. Do you mean meme? Then if it firmly believes that it is invincible, wouldn't it really be invincible? Kaylan glanced at the seraph shrouded in a beam of light. Isn't this plug-in a bit outrageous? Cognition also has limits, Pan patiently explained to Kaylan. From a human worldview, the existence of memes is indeed like an unreasonable plug-in, but if you combine the vision expand, and you will find that even plug-ins must abide by the rules. I think you should understand that writing a game plug-in requires more than just randomly typing a few lines of code to succeed. So, how to kill this thing? Kaylan asked. In 5 minutes, he had no time or interest to study memes or power cognition. He just wanted to know how he could get rid of this monster. He didn't know whether the undead crew would stay. There is a backup plan, but if he wants to walk out of the underground icehouse alive, he must kill the seraph. You have to kill me, Pan said with a smile, and Kaylan seemed to be able to imagine the other person shrugging his shoulders with ease. Although the main body of the meme has happened many times, its origin is there is no change. You can understand that you two have exactly the same source code. Although memes are harmful in ways that are difficult to describe in words, these things have no effect on you. It can't work on me? But I was almost killed by it just now. That's because your own strength is too weak. In terms of strength alone, you are not even as good as the blind man you just drove away, Pan said. So? Are you going to perform a complete set of body strengthening surgeries on me in these 5 minutes, or are you going to just airdrop a Gundam? Kaylan asked rhetorically. I can give you the most direct power. Pan suddenly lowered his voice. Hey, how about it? Does this sound a lot like the words used by demons in myths and legends to seduce humans? If there is a way to kill this guy in front of you, then don't talk nonsense, Kaylan said. 1.5 minutes have passed. According to the time you said, this guy will break free in 3.5 minutes. It's being released. Oh, yes, take a few steps back, be careful not to hit your feet. Kaylan immediately stepped back a few meters. Before he could ask what the other party was throwing, a metal bucket suddenly fell from the sky and hit him in front of him, making a loud bang sound. Are you planning to hit me to death? Kaylan looked at the metal bucket. The bucket was only half a meter high and only about 30 centimeters in diameter. If it contained a weapon, then the weapons a little too small. Even Asano Akira's war blade couldn't fit into this metal bucket. Didn't I tell you to take 2 steps back? Can you blame me? Pan complained. Okay, hurry up and open the gift. What is inside here? Kaylan took a step forward. He found a biometric lock on the top of the metal barrel. He immediately pressed his palm to the scanning plate, but suddenly there was a faint sound at the tip of his index finger. A stinging sensation, like being stung by a small insect. He raised his palm, just in time to see a drop of his blood being sucked into the scanning plate. Then, the two rows of red warning lights on both sides of the biometric lock suddenly jumped to green, and a hidden gap appeared in the center of the barrel. A lot of steaming light yellow viscous liquid flowed out from this gap. Before it flowed to the ground, it was frozen halfway and turned into a substance similar to amber. Kaylan quickly recognized that what flowed out of the metal bucket was LCL liquid commonly used in medical life support cabins. It is also commonly known as water of life. This liquid is very similar to the amniotic fluid in the womb. It can provide oxygen and nutrients to the organism soaked in it. Under the action of specific electric current, it can even reshape the missing limbs of the organism. It is known as the new era, the greatest invention in the field of biomedicine, bar none. Why is there LCL liquid in the metal barrel? Could it be that what's inside is a living thing? It's a set of armor, a set of living armor from Alpha Civilization, Penn replied. Living armor? Living. Ian's movements stopped instantly, and he subconsciously wanted to withdraw his hand and stay as far away from the things in the metal barrel as possible. It is active in the biological sense, but it is not an independent organism. You can think of it as a xenogenic organ that can be transplanted into the human body. Xenogenic organs transplanted into humans. This is not the first time Kaylan has heard this statement. In the wilderness, there are many crazy exiles who will choose to transplant the organs or limbs of indigenous creatures into their own bodies in order to gain powerful power. But this kind of crazy transplantation, the success rate of surgery is extremely low. Less than half of people can walk off the operating table alive, and of those less than half, more than 90% will die of infection and rejection within just a few days. Out of 100 people who receive xenogenic organ transplants, only one person can survive for more than 3 months, but this lucky person will be accompanied by lifelong pain and suffering. Exchanging one at this price is not that powerful. The power of surgery, whether it is cost-effective, only the person who undergoes the surgery can know the answer. It goes without saying that the Institute must have done some research on xenogenic organ transplantation, but the results are probably not very successful. Compared with the already very mature cyborg prosthetic technology, the organs of indigenous creatures are really not safe at all. Sex and stability. So, if I want to gain power, I have to transplant this living armor into my body, Kaylan asked. Otherwise, faintly, Kaylan seemed to hear Pan chuckle, just like a devil laughing when he saw a human who couldn't withstand temptation. But I have to remind you, don't wear this living body. The process of armoring may not be comfortable, moreover, it will have an irreversible impact on your body. As for the final result of this impact, I can't say. The process of putting on this living armor may not be comfortable. I'm afraid it's very painful, right? Kaylan sighed. As for the irreversible effects, what do you mean specifically? It's hard to say. We have done several in vivo experiments, but those volunteers are too ordinary, and none of them can successfully transplant, so we don't know what will happen after you put it on. Pan after a pause, maybe, it might turn into a monster. Can I choose not to wear it? Yes, you have the right to refuse, Pan said immediately, but the support we can provide you is limited to this. If I refuse, do you have any other ways to deal with Seraph? Have a plan B. What is it? Directly launch the core module of the Ark and the Earth's gene pool into space to start the second round of the Great Drift. I believe that there must be a third planet suitable for human habitation in this universe, Pan said in a very serious tone. It's easy. If you ignore the content of his words, you can't tell that his plan is to abandon the Ark and the tens of millions of people on it. Running away, right? Yes, the meme thing is so unreasonable that it is impossible to deal with it with the existing methods of mankind. Since we can't defeat it, of course we can only choose to run away to preserve the fire. P.S. Thanks to book friend 20220111213202054 for the 10,000 starting coins. Congratulations on the birth of the 33rd helmsman of this book, Alien Relic Hunter, author, and Chen-Mi-san. Chapter 588. You can run, but what about the others? Just leave them here to die, Kaylan asked. Otherwise, do you have a better way? The original purpose of building the Ark was to preserve the fire of mankind. When we fled the solar system 1,000 years ago, we already abandoned tens of billions of our compatriots. So what if we abandon them again? Pan directly retorted Ian's words. If you have a better solution, you might as well say so. If it is feasible, we will consider it. By the way, let me remind you that the distance between Seraph and Seraph is out of trouble. There are still 2 minutes. And it will take at least a minute for you to put on that living armor and adapt to it. So, there is only the last minute left for you to make a decision. Can't we separate the entire module of the West 2nd District from the Ark like the East 9 District did, and then destroy it with powerful weapons? Kaylan couldn't help but speed up his speech. You also said that Seraph's ability has its limits. I don't believe that if all the weapons on the Ark fire at the same time, it can block it. If the place where you confront Seraph is in the biological laboratory building of the Institute, we can indeed destroy it together with the entire West 2nd District module. Pan paused and continued, but the problem is that the underground ice, the location of the library, is too deep. Kaylan was stunned. He suddenly realized that the location where he and Seraph were now was no longer within the scope of the West 2nd District module. The vertical secret passage connecting the 4th and 5th floors alone is more than 3,000 meters deep. The entire 5th floor of the underground ice house has sunk into the cooling pool of the Ark's main reactor, and the Ark's main reactor cannot be separated separately like those regional modules. As for firing at the main reactor, it would be cleaner to let the reactor explode directly. Anyway, the result is the same. So, I actually have no choice at all. Kaylan showed a helpless smile and shook his head. Don't be so depressed. Look at you, your smile is too forced, Pan said. Obviously, the other party can see Ian's current expression through the monitor on the power armor. The authority of the Undead Crew Association is much higher than that of the Crisis Management Department. Okay, how to use this thing? Kaylan walked to the front of the metal bucket and put his hand into the crack. He touched the thing sealed in the metal bucket. It felt cold and smooth to the touch. He thought it was a container made of glass material, but when he took it out, he found that it was a dark red sphere. It was an ochre red that was close to brown, like the color of condensed blood scab, but the surface was polished as smooth as pearls. That's it? As soon as Pan finished speaking, the surface of the sphere suddenly melted, and the entire sphere instantly turned into a small snake that seemed to be made of plasma, wrapping around Ian's palm. Crack! A crisp sound came from Ian's hand. The extremely hard composite armor was actually shredded by this blood snake, and the broken metal pieces flew everywhere. The blood snake transformed again and wrapped Ian's entire exposed hand in the air. At this moment, Kaylan felt as if there were countless sharp needles piercing through his skin, muscles, and even bones. It was difficult to describe the feeling in words. He felt that his body was tightening uncontrollably. Things like plasma were drilling into his body along the pores and swimming from the blood vessels in his palms to his limbs. Hundreds of skeletons. Ah! Kaylan couldn't help but cry out in pain. This kind of pain was completely different from the intermittent needle-pricking pain in his brain. Kaylan even suspected that what was swimming in his blood vessels was a stream of hot and red molten iron. He guessed right, the transplantation process of this living armor was indeed very painful. Kaylan felt as if his skin had been peeled off, and his bloody muscles and bones were exposed to the extreme cold of nearly 100 degrees below zero, but there was a constant burning sensation in his body, and the outside world against the low temperature. He would rather his nerves be frozen or burned like this, but at least his senses can be blunted, but the sensitivity of every nerve ending seems to be stretched to the highest level, over and over again, tirelessly, like the nerves the center sends a signal of extreme pain. Plop, Kaylan suddenly knelt down, arched his body, pressed his forehead against the weight of his upper body, made fists with both hands and kept hammering the ground, making a muffled sound of bang, bang. This pain has long exceeded the limit that humans can bear. Logically speaking, the brain's self-protection mechanism should make him faint, but this protection mechanism seems to have been artificially shut down. Ian's not only did his consciousness not become blurry, but it became clearer. He could clearly feel the feeling of foreign objects scurrying around in his body. They kept destroying tissues everywhere in the body, then quickly repaired and rebuilt them, and then destroyed them again. They reveled unscrupulously, seemingly not caring that the body's self-awareness was on the verge of collapse and could lead to destruction at any time. Be patient, the pain is only short-lived. At least you are much better than the previous volunteers, and your fit with the living armor is almost 100%, you know, before you, a total of 67 people died of transplantation. The rejection reaction at the end was the worst one, even the whole body exploded and turned into a rain of blood. Wow, that scene was spectacular. Pan's voice rang in Ian's ears, but Kaylan had no intention of listening to what he was saying. He only felt an indescribable force pouring into his limbs, the plasma flowing around every time destroy and rebuild his body, and the new parts will be strengthened by leaps and bounds. At this time, Ian's body is like the ship of Theseus. From head to toe, no part of it belongs to the original one. Body. It's just that this ship of Theseus has replaced all the wooden boards originally used to form the hull with nano-alloy armor plates. His body had been destroyed more than a dozen times in just a few dozen seconds, and was also reborn a dozen times. That living armor had completely integrated with him. It actually succeeded, Pan muttered softly. It seems they didn't lie to me. It's really not luck that you got to this point. Ian's body stopped twitching. He slowly got up from the ground, raised his hand, and made two empty fists in a daze. From the outside, his body didn't seem to have changed at all compared to before, but he knew better than anyone else how his body had changed in these tens of seconds. Does this mean, the transplant is successful? Kaylan asked in a low voice. Aside from this power, what impact will it have on me? No one knows, Pan replied, because you were the first to succeed. Apart from you, only one other person has tried a transplant and survived. Of course, he didn't live long. And you still know this person, Pan added. I know. Who? The last Pope Chiron. One of the mistakes he made was to covet the power of this living armor and fuse it with the living armor without informing other members of the crew, but unfortunately, he failed and ended up like that, and could only spend the last days of his life in a cold space station. Chiron? How could he? Kaylan opened his eyes slightly, his words full of shock. Maybe you would think that what caused Chiron's death was the puppet entity that invaded the sick village, but in fact, when he was expelled from the undead crew, his life had already entered a countdown. The erosion of the puppet entity, it just speeds up the death process, Pan said without emotion. In my opinion, he is a complete idiot, but the candidate recommended by this idiot is a bit interesting. The candidate in Pan's mouth naturally refers to Kaylan. Then will I also become, like Chiron? Kaylan couldn't help but ask. Probably not, Pan said. Chiron had a serious mutually exclusive reaction in the first step of merging with the living armor. He thought he was different from the volunteers who died tragically, but in fact, he was different from the volunteers who died tragically. The fit between those volunteers and the living armor is even lower. Then what? Then? This idiot knew he was in trouble, so he could only send us a distress signal. We spent a lot of effort to peel the living armor out of his body, but his body has been irreversibly traumatized. As Pan was talking, he suddenly sighed for the first time. I also know that he was too anxious, and we spent too much time on waiting. Maybe he was tired of waiting, so he make that decision. Waiting? What are you waiting for? I know that when I say this, you will be cursing in your mind, how come everyone in the immortal crew is a riddler, but I still have to tell you that there are some things that are not suitable for you to know now. You are a chess piece. Is a very important chess piece, and may be enough to determine the outcome of the entire game, but before that, you only need to follow the grid on the chessboard and move forward step by step. The pawns walking forward on the chessboard step by step, Kaylan said. But when the pawn reaches the end of the chessboard, it can be promoted into any chess piece except the king. For details, please refer to Beidou chess rules. Let's not talk about this for now. Now that you have separated this living armor from Chiron's body, can you separate it from me later? No, Chiron has not been fused with the living armor. Being separated from his body is like taking out a stone that he has eaten in his stomach, and what you have eaten is not an indigestible stone. This armor has become a part of your body. At this moment, Kaylan suddenly felt a strong wind coming towards him. Before he had time to dodge, he was slammed into the wall behind him, and his entire body was embedded in the alloy wall. The communication between him and Pan was suddenly interrupted. Kaylan raised his head with some effort, and saw that the light pillar shrouding the seraph had completely disappeared, and the opponent's 6 wings were burning with extremely bright flames at the moment. Hundreds of them, including those 4 faces, their eyes were all staring at Kaylan, and Kaylan could even see his current predicament from the other person's pupils. Judgment 4 mouths spoke at the same time, and 6 wings flapped violently. Kaylan finally saw the move that had just slapped him away. They were 6 wing-shaped shadows separated from the wings, just like the main body. These shadows are also burning with blazing flames, looking quite magnificent. 6 phantoms blasted directly into the human-shaped groove that Kaylan smashed into the wall, and the sound of air bursting echoed throughout the underground ice house. But when the flames dissipated, an ochre-red figure walked out of the wall step by step. Have you never heard of the principle of there is no harm when there is smoke? The ochre-red figure, that is, Kaylan, said slowly. The power armor on his body had been completely shattered, but a large amount of thick plasma seeped out from his pores, forming a layer of armor similar to a blood scab on the surface of his skin. This armor is covered with raised edges and thorns. Large pieces of plate armor cover the vital parts of the chest and back, and countless small blood scales cover the joints, the parts of the abdomen that need to be bent, and at the ends of Ian's hands, a pair of sharp claws that are 30 to 40 centimeters long extend outward along the 10 fingers. On these sharp claws, which are completely condensed from plasma, there are unknown why is it still glowing with a layer of luster unique to metal? These pairs of wings of yours are so ugly, so I decided to tear them off for you. P.S. Regarding the depth of the underground ice house, Setting Chapter 554 states that it took Kaylan nearly half a minute to pass through the secret passage at a speed not much slower than a free fall. Given that star alpha, the acceleration of gravity is almost the same as that of the Earth. Calculating the length of the secret tunnel based on a 30-second free fall is at least 4,000 meters, although this value is exaggerated, there is actually no problem. Taking into account the friction with the channel wall and air resistance, I finally took the depth of 3,000 meters. According to the setting of this book, the Ark is a large cone-shaped interstellar colony ship with a diameter of more than 400 kilometers. The location of the West 2nd District is very close to the center of the cone, so it is normal for the thickness of the hull to exceed 10,000 meters at this location. In addition, the dozens of blocks on the Ark are not located on the same plane. They are divided into many upper and lower layers. Many areas themselves span several layers. As for the settings of the Ark itself, I will probably pass it through the diagram later. I will post it in the form of an Easter egg chapter after the article is merged. Of course, the premise is that I can find a drafting master who can understand what I mean. I have almost forgotten all the CAD I learned in college. Book friends who have the intention and ability can join the group. Come to me. It's not free, you will be paid based on the results, and you will be given a role with a certain role in the book. PPS thanks to book friend 20210625190213650 for the 500 starting coins. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Alien Relic Hunter, author, and Chen-Mi-san. Chapter 589. Ian's voice seemed to still stay in place, but his figure had already appeared behind Seraph. The pair of bloody claws broke through the flames in the blink of an eye, piercing the roots of Seraph's top pair of wings. Bah! Those huge wings were torn off by Lan directly from Seraph's main body, which was mutated from the egg of Yinglong. A large amount of blood spurted out from the wound and was quickly frozen into pink in mid-air. A large piece of ice was smashed into pieces, and then it was smashed to pieces on the hard ground. The four faces of Seraph screamed at the same time, and its remaining four wings suddenly rolled behind it, trying to catch Lan, who was unable to move in the air. However, Lan did not dodge. Instead, he landed directly on Seraph's body, stepped on the other party's body, and stepped directly over Seraph's head. Lan lowered his head and met one of Seraph's four faces. In the other's eyes, he saw deep doubts and fear, as well as a trace of indescribable resentment. Although Lan was not sure whether the other party could see his face behind the bloody visor, he still smiled at Seraph, then stretched out his hands, poked straight into the eye sockets of this face, and pushed the two. An eyeball was dug out of its socket. The two eyeballs separated from the main body did not die immediately, but struggled desperately in Ian's palm, as if Seraph's main body and these two eyeballs had a very special magnetic field. As long as Lan releases his hand, and his two eyeballs will be sucked back into his sockets. Of course Lan would not let them go back. He directly made fists with both hands and crushed the two beating eyeballs on the spot. The eyeballs that had turned into paste finally calmed down, leaked out from between Ian's fingers, and dropped to the ground. These mushy minced meats were not frozen. At this time, the temperature in the hall was rising sharply. Although Lan did not have any equipment with temperature measurement function at hand, he could determine the surrounding temperature by just relying on his body senses. The temperature has risen to above 0 degrees Celsius, and even the ice particles scattered on the ground have begun to melt. This terrifying heat naturally emanates from the Seraph. The entire body of the Seraph, which has lost a pair of wings and a pair of eyes, has been surrounded by dazzling flames. It is like a blazing Sunday. It is simply impossible to see directly with the naked eye. Seraphim let out an inhuman roar, and the range of the flames surrounding it suddenly expanded 3 to 4 times, instantly covering Lan. Only then did Lan discover that the flames released by Seraph were divided into two types. One was composed of energy bodies and could really have an impact on reality, while the other was a flame that only existed in spiritual fire in subjective perception. Compared with the former, the latter can give people the illusion that they are in a high temperature of tens of thousands of degrees, even if they are wearing the best insulation equipment, even if the actual temperature around them is less than 0 degrees Celsius, as long as a group of spiritual fire invades your cognitive field, and you will feel as if you have fallen into the boiler of a steel mill. The burning sensation and extreme pain are so real that it makes people basically I can't tell whether all this is fantasy or reality. Even Lan, who is immune to mimetic infection, cannot escape this kind of spiritual fire that directly interferes with brain cognition. It's a pity that now he seems to be a little numb to pain. Ian's figure disappeared from the spot again. This time, he chose to break through head-on. The bloody claws can not only tear through the flames of reality, but are also aggressive against spiritual fire. Lan crossed his arms, then swung out his claws, and immediately a blank area without any light pollution was cleared directly in front. With the short gap between the light flames being separated, he directly passed through this narrow blank area. He got through it and came to the side of Seraph. Bah! Another pair of wings was torn off, and Seraph suddenly let out a scream like a baby crying. Its remaining 3 faces had been distorted into an inhuman appearance due to severe pain. As a large amount of blood spurted out from the broken wing root, the surface of Yinglong's egg, the body of Seraph, began to deflate. It turns out to be a hollow ball, Kaylan said. His claws did not attack the last pair of wings, but inserted into the wound of the broken wing, and pulled hard to both sides, pulling the already broken wings. The terrifying wound expanded several times. Blood gushing like a fountain can no longer describe the scene at this moment. The violent plasma was like a burst fire hydrant, completely dyeing the ceiling, walls, and floor of the entire hall red. As for Seraph's body, it quickly shrank like a deflated balloon, and soon turned into a human form less than 1.5 meters tall. It was a clone hidden in the center of Yinglong's egg, but at this moment its body was covered with a shrunken skin, and 4 completely deformed faces clung to the surroundings of its head. The facial features on these faces had already completely misplaced. At first glance, it looks like a portrait in a cubist painting by Pablo Picasso. And the face whose eyes were taken out by Kaylan happened to be the face directly in front of the clone, with plasma and broken tissue fragments still falling out of the pair of black eye sockets. Seraph's remaining pair of wings drooped down, dragging behind its waist. The originally gorgeous and smooth feathers were stained with blood, and fell to the ground, soaked in thick and sticky plasma. Kaylan took a step earlier. The clone subconsciously took a step back, but it tripped over the skin that clung to its legs and fell backwards to the ground. It tried to flap its wings, but the wings only scraped through the blood a few times and failed to lift its body off the ground. The dazzling flames had completely disappeared, and the temperature in the hall once again dropped back to below 0. Soon, an inch thick of plasma on the ground froze the clone and its pair of wings to the ground, causing it to freeze to the ground. Unable to move. So cold. It said in a trembling voice, I feel so cold. You feel cold because you are heading towards death, Kaylan said. Even if I move you to a heated place now, it will be useless. He could feel that the life force of the clone was rapidly flowing out of its body. The pupils of the eyeballs on its wings had begun to expand, and purple-black corpse spots began to gradually appear on its body. In fact, the fusion of the clone and Yinglong's egg is not perfect. It just controls the power of Yinglong's egg in some way. The fact that it still retains the body of the little boy is the best proof. Why, God refuses to favor. The clone murmured, I'm obviously trying my best to satisfy him. Your performance is too artificial. It can only be regarded as a third-rate bad movie. Kaylan squatted down and looked directly at the 2 dark holes. Even if you have been fed shit by capital to the point where you have no appreciation. Audiences, when they see such a bad movie, will be eager for it to end as soon as possible. Why? Don't ask me. I've already answered 2 of your questions. Now it's my turn to ask, Kaylan said. You said earlier that I was a body. What does that mean? There is a body in my body, someone else's stuff. What does that mean? Kaylan thought for a while and added, don't tell me that's just a random excuse you made up to delay time. The clone did not answer. Its body was no longer trembling. The eyes on the other 3 faces were wide open. The dark pupils had expanded to the maximum extent and they had completely lost their look. It's already dead. Damn it, Kaylan couldn't help but cursed. You died a little too easily, didn't you? Generally speaking, a boss of this level shouldn't linger for a long time, only to have another wave of rebirth come at the end. Are you going to fight back? Kaylan was so angry that he kicked the clone on the chest. He only heard a crisp click sound, and the clone's upper and lower bodies were directly broken into 2 parts, and the inner part of the torso appeared directly in front of Ian's eyes. Kaylan noticed that the organs in the cloned body were like mummies that had been dried for hundreds or thousands of years. The heart had even shrunk into a small dark brown ball smaller than a walnut, and was covered with several roots. The same withered tendons and blood vessels hung inside the empty chest. Its bones were covered with large and small holes. Kaylan didn't even touch it. The ribs broke into several pieces under the squeeze of the tight skin. Some parts even turned into fine bone powder. It was simply it's crispier than freshly baked French pancakes. Even the outer skin that originally belonged to Yinglong's egg was rapidly decaying and degrading. Even though the ambient temperature had dropped to dozens of degrees below zero, it still seemed impossible to preserve its body. In less than 5 minutes, the corpse of Seraph had turned into a pool of pus. It wasn't until the last feather on its wings dissolved in the pool of pus that the low temperature of the underground ice house began to take effect on its body. The gray-white pus was quickly frozen into a large flat mass of ice. Immediately afterwards, the water separated from the pus quickly formed a thin layer of white frost on the surface of the ice ballast. Pleasant battle, Pan's voice came from behind. Kaylan turned around and found a security robot usually used to patrol underground ice houses leaning against the exit of the secret passage. This kind of security robot has no hands. With its structure, it can only use metal pliers to collide with each other to make a sound instead of clapping. Becoming a monster, does that mean what I look like now? Kaylan said. The blood-colored armor on his body suddenly dissolved and turned into flowing plasma, which once again penetrated K-Ian's body through the pores on his skin. K-Ian's eyebrows twitched unnaturally twice. Obviously, this process was not painless. I don't know. I told you that you are the first person to successfully fuse with this living armor. We can't predict what will happen to you. The guard robot used its limited movable joints to make a somewhat funny shrugging. By the way, shouldn't you find a piece of cloth to cover it up? Do the people of the immortal crew still care about this? Kaylan was unmoved, and just faced the guard robot controlled by Pan in front of him calmly. Or do you think I will care? You are also a public figure now, so you have to pay attention to your own image, Pan said. People from the crisis management department will arrive at the scene in half an hour. Although they will not spread your nude photos, you should not want to. This image appears in the video file of the archive, right? Okay. Kaylan bent down, and the plasma-like living armor poured out from the back of his hand, covering his entire fist, forming a simple-looking glove. Kaylan directly smashed his fist on the ground, broke the crimson ice, pulled out half a piece of cloth from it, and wrapped it around his waist. It was part of the blood-stained white coat that the clone had previously worn. Unfortunately, it was blown to pieces by shotguns and could only barely cover K-Ian's vital parts. Can you tell me the origin of this living armor? Kaylan asked. Isn't this too much? It's not too much. The guard robot shook its head. It comes from an S-class ruins. Then what? Gone. Is this gone? Then what else do you want to know? If you want to see those highly professional research reports, I can send them to you after things are sorted out here. But if you ask me to talk about it, I'm afraid it won't take more than a few days. Ya can't tell clearly. Pan's tone was full of helplessness. Can't you just pick out the key points? Kaylan was also helpless. There is no key point, or in a sense, those research reports are full of key points. It depends on how you define it. However, I can tell you the name of that ruins. What is the name of the ruins? What is its number? There is no number. This is an undisclosed ruins, but someone has already been to that place. There was a hint of joking in Pan's words. Unnamed island, a lonely island standing on the endless sea, where time does not flow and the sun never sets. The corners of K-Ian's eyes twitched suddenly. Of course he knew which island the other party was talking about. Sure enough, the undead crew would know about it, but since they knew the existence of the island, why did they let General Maginot come to question them? Is it just to test yourself? Is this necessary? You all know. I know. The guard robot nodded, but we can pretend not to know. The crew will want to give you as much freedom as possible, rather than turning you into a puppet at our mercy. If a puppet is really needed, I think this robot is much easier to use than you. As he spoke, Pan suddenly controlled the robot to perform a backflip and landed steadily on the ground. Okay, I have one more question. Ask Pan was very generous. What does the clone mean by body and other people's things? P.S. Thanks to Steelfist Woo 2 for the 100 starting coins. P.P.S. Here's a piece of trivia. I don't know how many book friends know this. The famous Picasso is the founder of Cubism, not the abstraction that many people would say when they mention Picasso. The biggest difference between these two schools is the difference is, in Cubist paintings, you can at least roughly see what the artist is painting, while abstract paintings are completely composed of basic elements such as color blocks, lines, and geometric figures, and there are few concrete things. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chen San. Chapter 590. I can't answer these questions, partly because your authority is not enough for you to know the truth, and partly because even I don't know, Pen replied. Which part doesn't even you know? Kaylan couldn't help but be a little confused. Logically speaking, the Immortal Crew Association is already the organization with the highest authority among humans. If even Pan doesn't know something, who else is qualified to know it? Could it be that the members of the Immortal Crew Association are also divided into 3 levels? But judging from the details shown in all aspects, those seat serial numbers are really just serial numbers and do not represent the level of authority. Otherwise, when Kaylan joins the undead crew and inherits the title of Pope of Chiron's 5th seat, wouldn't he be ranked in front of most of the members? This is obviously impossible. The Immortal Crew should be an organization with a balance of power, at least on the surface, just like the United Parliamentary Group. Each member's voting weight is equal. However, the power represented behind each member, that's a different matter. It is reasonable to think that some members of the crew know some secrets that other members do not know. Especially for members who joined later like Kaylan, there are many events that they have not personally experienced. It is difficult to get a glimpse of all the details of the events by relying on files alone. Still can't tell. The guard robot shook its head, and its neck joints made a crisp click sound due to the low temperature. You will naturally know after you join us. Okay, let me ask another question. Kaylan hesitated for a moment, then continued, am I a human being? He did not ask am I still a human being, but directly asked am I a human being? Although there is only 2 words difference between these 2 questions, their meanings are completely different. Kaylan is difficult. I believe that so many unreasonable things can happen to an ordinary human being. He even once wondered whether he might be an experimental subject like Asano Akira, but he didn't know it. But he also felt that the possibility of this was very low. If he was really an experimental subject being manipulated, then there would be no need for the undead crew to reveal so much information to him, and Chiron would not do it at all. Recommend yourself to inherit the seat of Pope. On the contrary, Kaylan felt that the experience of the prophet of the heretical sect was more like the story of an experimental subject resolutely rebelling after seeing through the truth about ARC's top executives. The first half was quite resistive, but in the second half, after he successfully broke away from the shackles, he went to another extreme. It would be great if the Immortal Crew would be willing to tell him things related to the prophet. Unfortunately, even if Kaylan asked, he would probably get the same answer. Kaylan asked Pan this question just to verify this point. Since the Immortal Crew would not mind letting him know this information, there is absolutely no need for them to hide these things from themselves. The more they conceal, the more suspicious they will become and the less trust they have in the Immortal Crew. If you don't handle it well, you may become the second prophet. Some things must be explained openly and clearly. Kaylan felt that the other party must also understand this truth. Yes, Pan answered simply this time, of course you are a human being. Just like the tens of millions of people on the Ark, you are just luckier and have acquired some abilities that are beyond the scope of ordinary people's cognition. Kaylan breathed a sigh of relief. Is it really just luck? At least that's what I think. Pan controlled the guard robot and tapped his metal skull with his fingers. Actually, I was not optimistic about you at the beginning. The sentence I disdain the most is luck is also a part of strength, but I have to admit that you are indeed lucky. Kaylan knew in his heart that even if he continued to ask questions, Pan would probably say some nonsense to excuse him. This topic had lost the meaning of continuing. What about Demeter? Why didn't she come forward this time? Kaylan walked around the hall and asked as he walked. Are you obsessed with that old woman? No way. I didn't expect you to be so good at it, Pan said with some surprise. Unfortunately, the security robot's hardware conditions were limited and it was unable to show such an exaggerated look. I'm just curious. The person who contacted me before was Demeter. Why was it suddenly replaced this time? Kaylan said angrily. It can't really be because your serial number is Demeter, so the living body you have to deliver the armor to me, right? Then you guys are too formalistic, or, in other words, too middle class. Of course not for this reason, although I think the reason you mentioned is great. Pan shook his head. That old woman, I'm afraid she can't protect herself now, so how can she have time to take care of you? Next Monday, the crew will have an internal meeting if we want to launch an accountability process against her. Even if she is not impeached, her authority will probably be greatly restricted. Impeach? Kaylan was stunned for a moment. He wanted to ask if members of the Immortal Crew Association could still be impeached, but he quickly thought of the Pope Chiron who was expelled from the Crew Association. What did she commit, thing? Well, that's it. The guard robot raised its chin at the pus formed by Seraph on the ground. Although this accident was caused by that guy Smith, without the acquiescence of the old woman, with Smith's with the authority, we simply cannot obtain so many cell samples. You know, according to the ultimatum issued by the crew to the Institute, the batch of cloned cells should have been destroyed 2 days ago. This experiment was instructed by Demeter. Kaylan was stunned for a moment. The information revealed by the other party was honestly a bit beyond his expectation. He originally thought that it was just people from the Institute who were trying to commit suicide without telling their superiors, but unexpectedly, that seemingly elegant and dignified lady turned out to be a crazy person at heart. If the experiment was directly instructed by her, then the accountability process can be omitted, Pangu said with a smile, but it's almost the same. This old woman seems to be very patient, but in fact she is more impatient than anyone else. But her methods are better than that idiot Chiron. At least she won't experiment on herself. Oh, by the way, that little girl Renee, well, you haven't slept with her, have you? Pan suddenly changed the topic and asked. No. Kaylan couldn't help but raise his head and glance at the guard robot, although Pan looked like a big boy who had just grown up in terms of personality and tone, but from what he said to Dr. Renee's little girl movie, judging from the name, this guy is obviously an old monster who has lived for who knows how many years. She is also one of Demeter's subordinates. Although there are no factional disputes within the crew, each of us still has a few cronies who can be used easily. Renee is such a character. You probably don't know that this girl has planned at least 30 attack plans to try to force you to have sex. She even tried to add 200 standard doses of aphrodisiacs to your food. But the meal was intercepted by people from the security bureau and was not delivered to your table. Kaylan stared at the robot speechlessly, and after a while he said, with my current physique, the medicine for 200 people will probably not have any effect, right? That's hard to say. Besides, I didn't say the 200 doses were for people. That crazy girl gave a super concentrated version of the drug. The 200 standard doses actually meant for lay veterinary standards. Is she planning to poison me to death? Ian's mouth twitched twice, and she couldn't help but secretly feel lucky that the meal was intercepted. If she really ate it, who knows what would happen? That's not true. She tested your cell clone tissue in advance and calculated the drug resistance before arriving at the actual dosage. Pan shrugged again. In comparison, the Morgan family's group of people, it's just a small fuss. the kind of incense they use, even if it's so strong that it triggers the fire alarm inside the cabin, it won't make you lose your mind. Of course, if you have that kind of incense yourself, if you think about it, then only a small dose can help the situation go smoothly. She even chose Sophia as an experimental subject. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Kaylan directly began to complain, "To be honest, it is difficult for me to tolerate this kind of behavior of attacking people around me. As a human being leaders, you should also know very well that when soldiers risk their lives for the Ark on the battlefield, what will happen if their families are insulted, right? Although I am not a soldier in the true sense, I am at least. Do you think I'm working hard for you?" I know. Pan nodded. "We will try our best to prevent such things from happening in the future." "Can even the Undead Crew Association just say try your best?" Kaylan complained with some dissatisfaction. "There is never a 100% reliable guarantee in the world. Otherwise, we wouldn't be standing here talking now, right?" The guard robot made a helpless gesture of spreading its hands. "Okay, Crisis Management Department, when people come, let them handle the cleaning work." As soon as Pan finished speaking, the vertical tunnel of the secret passage was filled with the whistling sound of heavy objects falling at high speed. The sound came from far to near, and finally there was a bang sound as the buffer propeller ignited and ejected. There was a loud explosion in the air, and 4 humanoid mechas over 3 meters high came out of the secret passage one after another. The people from the Crisis Management Department arrived a full 20 minutes earlier than the expected arrival time, and they obviously rushed all the way. "We received a message from the crew meeting, saying that you have solved the problem." The hatch on the chest of the humanoid mecha headed by it flipped up, revealing Lin Kaiming sitting on the ground. His face is covered with a silver-gray VR goggle. The sensors on the outside of the mecha will compile the surrounding terrain into a VR image and display it on the screen. This way the operator of the mecha can avoid being attacked by memes. Infection, but the disadvantage of this is that the sensors cannot identify those creatures infected by the meme. When facing the monsters wandering in the contaminated area, these mechas are almost half-blind. They can only rely on sonar devices to detect the movements of infected creatures, but the flaw of sonar is that it does not respond quickly enough and is prone to interference and deception. These 4 mechas all have some damage on their bodies. Those indigenous creatures that escaped suffered a lot in the battle. In order to speed up, some operators directly chose to risk being infected and conduct visual combat, so that we could get here early, Lin Kaiming said again, and the gas exhaled from his mouth instantly formed a large cloud of white mist. "The main body of the meme has been disposed of," Kaylan said. "Those indigenous creatures that escaped are now too mutated to survive and should no longer be at risk of infection." "Yes, so far, we have not received any news that anyone has been infected. By the way, aren't you cold?" Lin Kaiming only realized at this time that in this environment that is nearly 100 degrees below zero, Kaylan he only wore a rag around his waist, standing almost naked on the crimson ice formed by blood plasma. "Oh, when you say that, it seems a bit cold. Do you have any spare clothes?" Kaylan said. This really doesn't happen. "Otherwise, you wear my clothes and my mecha will be given to you," Lin Kaiming said and reached for the zipper at the collar. Forget it, if he was really afraid of the cold, he would have frozen to death long ago. Pan's lazy voice came from behind. "You don't think about it with your brain. If it were you, you would just surround him. How long can you hold on in this place with the rag on? I think you're already a bit too cold even before you take off your clothes, right?" "Who?" Lin Kaiming and the other 3 mechas turned around instantly. Only then did they notice that in addition to Kaylan, there was a guard robot leaning against the wall in the hall. But before Pan could speak again, Lin Kaiming's face showed a look of panic. Are you a member of the crew?" "You still have some brains," Pan said. "Okay, that's it. Let's follow the preset procedures for the rest." After saying that, Pan went offline directly without even saying hello to Kaylan. The head and arms of the out-of-control guard robot drooped, instantly switching to a waiting for activation state. Lin Keiming left 2 people to guard the 5th floor of the underground ice house to deal with the subsequent cleaning people. He and another person escorted K-Lan out of the contaminated area. Of course, he did not forget to ask someone to give him a gift. Wearing suitable clothes will avoid the embarrassing scene of K-Lan appearing naked on camera. P.S. Thanks to Yeleng Fenghan for the 100 starting coins. Alien Relic Hunter author, and Chen San. Chapter 591. Naturally, K-Lan does not need to worry about the follow-up matters. The people from the Crisis Management Department and the Security Bureau will take care of everything. As for how to explain to the public the reasons for the ship-wide blockade, there are not too many reasons that can be found. Just pick any one. Just say something that won't cause panic and riots among people. Of course, there will definitely be people who doubt this reason, but with ARC's official public opinion control efforts, as long as the undead crew members want to take care of it, there will be no such rumors at all. If you can't solve the problem, then solve it. People who ask questions, this method may seem crude and unreasonable, but it is the best choice for maintaining stability. What's more, most people can only complain to people they know well and just use it as a source of conversation after dinner. If under such circumstances there are still people who deliberately incite the public in the public media and try to reduce the official credibility of ARC through slander, suspicion, etc., then there is a high probability that there is something wrong with the composition of these people. Maybe the Security Bureau can still take this opportunity to uncover a group of special elements hidden among the people. Even if they are not from heretical sects, they are probably members of some radical organizations. It is difficult to detect such malicious people disguised as ordinary people, but if they jump out on their own, ARC has always adopted vigorous and resolute measures. As for the Morgan Consortium's frame-up of K-Lan last time, it was only possible because the undead crew wanted to test K-Ian's adaptability. If they decided to intervene, even the 2 stewardesses would not be able to board the battleship of Fleet Zero, let alone drugged K-Lan and secretly filmed the video. But this time the nature of the meme crisis is completely different. The confidentiality level of this accident is probably higher than that of Leviathan's resurrection. Now that we are talking about the Leviathan incident, we have to say that the Security Bureau's confidentiality work is still very good. This kind of thing is not just about blocking information. A rich mine like Leviathan that produces a large amount of energy crystals, suddenly disappeared, which had a great impact on market supply and demand. But not only did the news of Leviathan's resurrection and killing not spread, even the market price of energy crystals did not show any abnormal fluctuations. Tens of thousands of supply chains involving energy crystals in various industries, large and small, have not been affected in any way. K-Lan has never understood how the ARC officials managed to fill such a huge demand gap. Could it be that they relied on the mining surplus reserved in previous years? Logically speaking, there shouldn't be any surplus of hard currency like energy crystals. As much as it is mined, the market can absorb it. The Undead Crew Association can never use the emergency reserves of each fleet to fill the gap in the private market. K-Lan believed that they would not be able to do such a thing. That was putting the cart before the horse. Under the escort of Lin Keiming and another elite crisis management officer, K-Lan quickly passed through the contaminated area. At this time, a large number of heavily armed crisis management officers and Security Bureau agents had entered the contaminated area. There were gunshots coming from almost every direction, and the corpses of indigenous creatures and pretenders could be seen everywhere along the way. After the death of Seraph, the collections that were breached did not die with them, but fell directly into a violent state. Although they have now lost the ability to spread memes, the mutations caused by memes have not disappeared. From the reports constantly ringing on Lin Keiming's walkie-talkie, several cleaning teams are locked in a bitter battle. Hold on, the third batch of reinforcements is about to enter the contaminated area, Lin Keiming replied in the communication channel, then looked at K-Lan and showed a helpless smile. The entire crisis management department, there are at least 2/3 of the people died from the initial mimetic infection, and now manpower is really too tight. Then why don't you bring in the garrison to help? Kaylan asked. There are not many people in the garrison that can be spared, the entire ship is still in a state of blockade. The garrison has to work overtime to maintain order in each area. Although their mission is not as dangerous as ours, it is still just as onerous. Lin Kaiming paused and then said, the current blockade of the entire ship is gradually coming to an end. Those garrison troops in areas far away from the contaminated area will be transferred here first, it's just. Lin Kaiming couldn't help but sigh, there are too few useful people in the garrison. Kaylan knew very well what he meant. If he wanted to help in the contaminated area and ensure that the information would not be leaked, it was obviously impossible to just drop the vacated troops into the contaminated area. At the very least, he had to. It is the elite who were previously responsible for handling the East 9th District incident, and such elite accounts for less than 5% of the entire garrison. The few people who can be transferred are simply a drop in the bucket. Then you might as well let civil organizations intervene, Kaylan said. What? Lin Kaiming was stunned for a moment and looked at Kaylan in surprise. For a moment, he thought he heard wrongly. It is not in compliance with the regulations to allow non-governmental organizations to intervene, and it will make confidentiality work more difficult. Lin Kaiming explained immediately. I don't think so. Kaylan shook his head. Of the collections in the underground ice house of the Institute, what proportion did they personally capture from outside? Although Lin Kaiming didn't know why Kaylan asked this question, he still thought about it carefully and gave a more conservative answer. If all the collections in the underground ice house are included, the Institute will. I think there are still 20% specimens caught by members themselves. Then the remaining 80%, could it be that they ran to the underground ice house on their own? Actually, even if you don't tell me, I know whose hands these things got here, Kaylan said while playing with the zipper pendant on his collar. It's nothing more than field troops, mercenaries, relic hunters, and various other. The vast majority of hunting companies owned by large consortiums are from non-governmental organizations that you call non-compliant. Speaking of this, Kaylan couldn't help but think of the young master of the Morgan family who died tragically at the cocktail party. The heavily armored Rhino Spade was the prey of Angray's biotechnology company, a subsidiary of the Morgan Consortium. Although this company is registered as reporting that its main business is to study the indigenous creatures of Planet Alpha, it is actually doing the work of hunters. The hunters here are not the same as relic hunters like Kaylan and others. It is not a profession, but the most original meaning of the word hunter. The front-line employees of this company are actually a group of mercenaries who have been hanging out all year round. They hold official research licenses to legally hunt and capture indigenous creatures. Whether it's parts of a specific organ, a complete corpse, or a living indigenous creature, they can get it for you, as long as you can afford the price. Later, Kaylan also used hacking technology to check the company's details. More than one-third of Angelus Biotechnology's orders came from official research institutes. In a sense, the personal quality of the employees of the civilian organizations at the top of the industry is definitely better than that of the soldiers in the garrison who can become soldiers as long as they pass the physical examination. Moreover, under the pressure of high liquidated damages, these people you can definitely keep it secret, Kaylan said. He was not bragging. Just speaking of the circle of ruin hunters, the few who could make a name for themselves were not as good as the low-level hunters who were uneven in quality and reputation. Many of the closely protected treasures in the Institute were brought out from high-level ruins by these people. The confidentiality agreements they signed may be stacked together higher than the desk, but they are rarely a leak occurred. On the contrary, the soldiers in the army often get drunk during their rotational vacations, and then loudly leak the battle situation on the front line in the bar. What reporters from the pheasant media like to do most is to squat in the bars where these soldiers love to go, inquiring about gossip on the front line, and then publish a lot of headline-grabbing articles with added flair. Kaylan didn't have any prejudice against the military, but people like Lin Kaiming had always had prejudice against civil society organizations. As a member of the Relic Hunters, Kaylan would still feel a little uncomfortable. The crisis management section rarely appears on weekdays, but when the people from the Security Bureau are working on things, their attitudes towards military personnel and civilians are completely different, so much so that in the eyes of many people, the Security Bureau agent is a completely unreasonable image. Okay, I will discuss your suggestions with Section Chief Schroeder, and he will have the final say. Lin Keiming nodded, but, if civil organizations can really provide help, the cleanup progress should be accelerated. A lot of. Actually, all you need to do is pick a civil society organization that has a long-term cooperative relationship with the Institute. I'm afraid these people know the relevant confidentiality regulations much better than the soldiers of the garrison. Kaylan said, by the way, there is a company whose reputation I don't think is very good. I personally suggest you avoid it. Which company? Lin Keiming immediately raised his ears. Even this big man deliberately named a company, so there is obviously a big problem. Angray's biotechnology company. Kaylan said, as long as there is a reasonable reason, he will not refuse such a matter of public vengeance. The managers of this company have violated 26 safety regulations. A dangerous indigenous creature, the heavy armored rhinoceros, was sent into the venue of an upper-class cocktail party, causing the death of more than a dozen powerful children, including a member of the Morgan family, and injuring more than 100 people. Afterwards, however, Angelus Biotechnology only dismissed 2 safety directors without receiving any official punishment. The reason was that the incident fell into the category of force majeure and no one could have expected that the sample would undergo stress mutations. Very clearly, there was serious negligence on the part of some people. Kaylan shrugged. Although this report was not made public, he had already read everything he needed to see. To be honest, the 2 security directors were really unlucky. It was clear that the main fault was not theirs, but in the end they became the scapegoats. As for all Angray's executives, they were not held accountable in any way. Is there really such a vicious incident? Lin Keiming was stunned for a moment. The Security Bureau was responsible for the cocktail party incident. Their crisis management department had to deal with matters related to the Institute. In addition, Lin Keiming was only the deputy captain of an action team before. That's it, he's not a high-level person, so it's normal that he doesn't know anything about it. Yes, do I need to lie to you? Kaylan continued, because I was one of the participants at that cocktail party. Tisk, if I hadn't reacted quickly, I would have been killed by that big bug. Okay, I understand. Lin Keiming nodded solemnly. Kaylan was not worried about him going to find someone to verify. After all, what he just said was true. In addition, I will inform the Security Bureau of this matter and let them re-examine the case. Lin Keiming added, although the big shot did not say it clearly, it is obvious that he has no regard for the Security Bureau's handling of the case. The result is not satisfactory. This may involve the interests of some powerful people, but for the Crisis Management Department, they never care about this kind of relationship. Lin Keiming secretly decided that if the people from the Security Bureau were unwilling to re-examine, even if it was an act beyond their authority, he would have to handle the matter. After returning to the headquarters, Kaylan first explained the incident of the undead crew to the other members of the hunting group, and then arranged for the hunting dog Enzwilajito to be responsible for the contact matters with 33. Despite the mimetic incident, it had a huge impact, but for Kaylan, it could only be regarded as a small episode. Now that the song is over, everything should get back on track. And their next most important business is naturally the further exploration of Yagunactor. It took Kaylan a full 2 hours to roughly arrange all the work, and then asked Schroeder to open a special pass. Amid the laughter of the hounds and the others, Kaylan hurried to Zafaiya's residence. Just when Kaylan arrived at the gate of the yard and got out of the car, he happened to see several security agents in dark gray uniforms taking 2 white coats out of the villa. Who are they? Kaylan stopped an agent and asked after showing his ID. They are Dr. Renee's assistants, the agent whispered in Kayan's ear. We are here to protect Miss Soma under the orders of the Crew Association. It seems that Pan's movements are quite fast, Kaylan said in his heart, but calmly nodded to the agents, bypassed them, and walked into the villa. As soon as he entered the house, Kaylan saw a girl wearing a lotus white dress coming down the stairs. This girl was none other than the big trouble that Kaylan entrusted to Zofia to take care of before going to the molten mine area. Ze Lugo. P.S. Thanks to Animico for the 500 starting coins, thanks to Stelra for the 100 starting coins. P.P.S. Regarding Lin Kaiming's attitude towards the protagonist, firstly, he is impressed by the protagonist's strength and analytical ability, and secondly, because the protagonist can directly bypass the crisis management department and have a dialogue with the undead crew, so in his eyes, Kaylan can definitely be regarded as an out-and-out big shot. Of course, the second reason accounts for the vast majority. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chen-Mi-san. Chapter 592. Compared with before Kaylan left, the girl's appearance had hardly changed except for her clothes, but in K-Ian's eyes, she seemed to have undergone a transformation. This subtle change is difficult to describe in detail in words. Generally speaking, it is the feeling of raising hands and feet, coupled with the natural micro-expressions and eyes on the face. Compared with before, it looks more like a real person. Human. Kaylan didn't know what Ze Lugo had gone through during this period, but no matter what, it was not a bad thing. If she could identify with her identity as a human being, maybe she wouldn't do those outrageous things to her compatriots. Kaylan thought secretly. From a certain point of view, Ze Lugo's danger factor is no less than that of the seraph he just eliminated. This seemingly cute girl, once she loses control, the consequences will definitely be unimaginable. Kaylan, the Sanwoo girl, focused her attention on Kaylan. She didn't seem surprised that Kaylan would appear here. Of course, with her ability, I'm afraid Kaylan hasn't entered the villa yet. She had already noticed it when they were in the yard. Kaylan, following Ze Lugo downstairs, was Zofia Soma, who was wearing a pale golden silk dress. She was wearing a snow-white plush shawl, and her long silky hair was tied around her head. Staring at Kaylan with a hint of surprise. K-Ian's eyes first stayed on her face for 2 seconds, and then moved down her slender neck. He suddenly discovered that Zofia was barefoot at this time, and her white and delicate toes were so direct she stepped on a thick brown carpet. Of course, this is not the key. The key is that she wears a black real-time monitoring anklet on the slender ankle of her right foot. The green indicator light on the outside of the anklet is still blinking. The ground flashed. Is it faked by someone from the institute? Kaylan asked, pointing to the anklet. Yes, Zofia nodded, but those people have been taken away. This thing just hasn't had time to be dismantled. Kaylan stepped forward quickly, and after just a glance, a surge of anger surged up. This anklet was not a common medical monitoring anklet, but a special model specially designed for dangerous people. The sensor chip of the anklet is connected to a concentrated explosive the size of a fingernail. If the sensor chip detects that someone is trying to forcibly remove the anklet, or the wearer of the anklet leaves the designated area, the explosive will be detonated directly. The dose of explosive may not be fatal, but it is more than enough to blow off the wearer's legs. Dr. Rene lied to him. This was not an ordinary physical examination at all, and all operations were not carried out in accordance with the rules and regulations. As for transgression, if putting explosive anklets on people's legs is not transgression, then what is transgression? The severity of this behavior has even exceeded the category of transgression. If Dr. Rene were standing in front of Kaylan now, Kaylan felt that he would break her legs without hesitation and let her experience this. It's like the feeling after the explosive anklet is triggered. Although Ze Lugo was here, Renee's people would never be able to harm Zofia, but what they did was completely beyond Ian's acceptance. Thinking of this, Kaylan directly said, "Wait a minute." After a moment, he turned around and ran outside the house. The two researchers were pushed into the car by the agents of the Security Bureau. The latter heard the footsteps, turned his head, and met Ian's unkind eyes. This agent is also a human spirit. The first second he saw something wrong with Ian's expression, he immediately guessed the key to the problem and said quickly, "Mr. Kaylan. The explosive in the monitoring anklet worn by Miss Soma has been removed. It fell off, but because we didn't bring special tools with us on this trip, in order to prevent Miss Soma from being injured, we didn't take off the anklet for the time being." Seeing that Kaylan didn't answer, he quickly added, "Colleagues with tools are already on their way, and they will arrive in 15 minutes at most." "Did they wear these anklets?" Kaylan asked, pointing to the two researchers sitting in the carriage. "Yes," the Security Bureau agent nodded. "Then why not let them dismantle it?" "Because." The agent was still hesitating, but one of the two researchers spoke first, "Only Dr. Renee knows the password to remove the anklet, and we can't remove it." "Then why didn't you ask her what her password was?" "Don't tell me you don't have her contact information," Kaylan continued. His tone was very calm. To be precise, it should be the extremely depressing calm before the storm. "Dr. Renee won't allow it to be removed," the researcher continued. "Anyway, as long as Miss Soma does not leave her residence, the anklet will not cause harm to her." Before the researcher could finish speaking, Kaylan reached into the car, grabbed her collar, pulled her out of the car, and threw her heavily to the ground. "You can't attack me. I'm from the Institute. The Security Bureau is not qualified to conduct violent interrogations on us," the researcher immediately shouted, and the Security Bureau agent on the side also pulled Kaylan nervously. "You'd better ask these people from the Security Bureau what the consequences will be if they use violence against us." Although the person had not gotten up from the ground, the researcher's tone suddenly changed. With the solid backing of the Institute, she has no fear even if the opponent is a member of the Joint Parliamentary Group. The Research Institute can be said to be the privileged institution second only to the Immortal Crew Association on this arc. Moreover, given their level, they do not have the right to know the existence of the Undead Crew Association, so for them, their own backstage can be regarded as the hardest backstage in the entire ship. "Mr. Kaylan, if things get too big and end badly," the agent said carefully in Ian's ear. "How do you define too much trouble?" Kaylan glanced at him and asked. "This. As long as you don't die, right?" Kaylan broke away from his hand, took out the ID that Schroeder gave him from his pocket, put it directly in front of the researcher's eyes, and asked word by word, "Then this, do you have the right to be rough with you?" Crisis Management Department." The researcher was startled at first, and then his body trembled slightly, and a layer of fear appeared in his eyes. For those of them in the Institute, they are not afraid of the Security Bureau and the military, but they are only afraid of this mysterious organization that rarely appears in public. When this group of people saw the Crisis Management Department, they were like old people. The corrupt officials of the era are the same as the Jiwei, a homophone used to prevent harmony. Everyone knows it, especially those researchers who often violate rules and regulations. On normal days, they might still rely on their great contribution to the ARC and do whatever they want, but if someone from the Crisis Management Department appears, it can only mean one thing: the people above have reached the limit of their patience with them. Limit. Kaylan took a step back and pulled out the pistol from the holster on his waist. "Wait a minute." When the Security Bureau agent on the side saw Kaylan pulling out his gun, his expression suddenly changed. But his expression changed again. He did not dare to stop Kaylan at all. He could only shout, "Wait. Wait first, wait. Don't worry, I told you not to kill anyone." Kaylan pointed the gun at the researcher's calf wrapped in gray stockings. The two researchers sent to Zofia's residence were both young women, and both could be considered beauties in appearance, but at this time, Kaylan couldn't even think of caring about her. Boom! Boom! The deafening sound of gunfire resounded through most of the block. Ian's sidearm was a .50 caliber hunting pistol. The power and gunfire of this thing were exactly that of a hand cannon. For a moment, the air cushion vehicles parked around him were stunned. The sirens rang out, covering even the screams of the researcher whose legs were broken. Many bodyguards in black suits and sunglasses ran in this direction, but after seeing the people and cars from the security bureau, they retreated back the same way. The neighborhood where Zofia lives is all full of single-family mansions and villas, and it is no exaggeration to say that the rich and powerful are gathered here. But in front of the security bureau, the vast majority of powerful people can only bow their heads obediently. Even those wealthy families with members of the joint parliamentary group sitting in charge will never be willing to have a head-on conflict with people from the security bureau. As for a lunatic who dared to shoot in this place, they were even more unwilling to provoke him. In line with the principle that one thing is worse than one thing less, the surrounding residents all made almost the same choice: recall the bodyguards and close the doors and windows. And at the same time warned his family members not to stick their heads out to watch the excitement. People have eyes, but bullets do not necessarily have eyes. If they are accidentally struck by a stray bullet, as long as no one is killed, there is almost no way to hold the security bureau accountable. After 2 shots were fired, Kaylan put the pistol back into the holster, and the female researcher who fell on the ground simply fainted from the pain after screaming for a while. Kaylan looked at another trembling researcher sitting in the car, who immediately shrank back. Although the broken legs could be regenerated by the medical cabin, the pain was unbearable for ordinary people. Especially for people like them who have good living conditions and have not suffered much. Don't, please, please. After throwing away her identity as a researcher, she was just a young girl in her early 20s. She had just graduated from the ivory tower and was specially recruited because of her excellent grades. After entering the institute, I had not even seen much of the dangers of society, let alone such battles. She originally thought that with her status as a researcher, the other party would not do anything to her no matter how powerful the authority was, but when she saw Kaylan firing 2 shots at her companions without hesitation, she interrupted. After the security agents nearby didn't even dare to stop her legs, her fascinating confidence disappeared instantly. She even felt that Kaylan would shoot his companion in the head again. After all, judging from the style of their research institute, the samples left over after human experiments are usually handled very cleanly. Living people are more troublesome than dead people. Although this sentence is hard to hear, it is a rule that most people in the institute agree on by default. But now, it's her turn to worry about whether the other party will clean up her. "You, get out of the car," Kaylan said. "No. I don't want to die, don't kill me," she cried, hugging the back of the seat in front of her. "If I don't kill you, come down," Kaylan said expressionlessly. The researcher was left with a firm shake of his head. "Don't force me to shoot you. If the car gets dirty, I'll have to trouble this guy from the security bureau to wash it," Kaylan said. It's okay that Kaylan didn't say this. The researcher almost cried when she said it. She firmly believed at this time that Kaylan asked her to get out of the car just to kill herself outside and prevent her from splashing out. Blood stained the car's interior. "If you don't come out, your companion will probably die of excessive blood loss," Kaylan said. Although these agents of the security bureau should have learned some battlefield first aid skills, but for this kind of injury, there is no medical equipment at hand. The situation was simply impossible to handle. On the contrary, these 2 researchers, as members of the biomedical team, not only had high-level medical licenses, but also had various medical equipment and commonly used drugs in the storage boxes they carried. "It's also all available." You want me to treat her?" The researcher was stunned for a moment, unable to turn around for a while. "Otherwise, if you continue to mess around, She will lose 2 legs, Kaylan said. Oh, oh, the researcher finally believed that Kaylan didn't want to kill the 2 of them. He quickly got out of the car with the storage box and ran to his unconscious companion. Kaylan used a large caliber pistol. The area below the knee of the researcher who was shot had lost the meaning of treating the wound. The other researcher could only hold back his fear, took out a medical electric saw from the storage box, and cut the wound. Cut off the attached skin and muscles below the knee, and then stop the bleeding and disinfect the severed limb. As for the bone fragments inserted into the flesh, we can only wait until we return to the institute and then slowly pick them out. If the wound has pseudo-healed by then, the debridement process will become very difficult and painful. Anyway, she wasn't the one who got shot, and it won't be her who hurts when the time comes, the remaining researcher thought so. She just wanted to quickly take care of her companion's injuries and then leave this place. No one could guarantee her that the guy next to her who would shoot if he said he would shoot would suddenly change his mind later. She couldn't help but feel a little lucky. Fortunately, the person who just spoke was not her. Otherwise, the roles of dealing with the wound and being treated would probably have to be reversed. P.S. Thanks, the reward is 200 starting coins. It's not that I made a typo, but this guy's ID is just a period. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Enchenmi-san. Chapter 593. With the help of 2 Security Bureau agents, the injured person was carried into the carriage. As for the minced meat and blood stained on the ground, the automatic cleaning robot responsible for the courtyard was disposed of. After watching the security agency's hovercar drive away, Kaylan let out an imperceptible sigh. In fact, even if he killed the 2 researchers, it wouldn't matter, but what's the point of doing so? Woolen cloth? Is it just to vent your anger? The reason why the people in the Institute dare to be so unscrupulous is because they have the support of the undead crew. In addition to the people in the Crisis Management Department who can check and balance them, they can completely override all the public power agencies of ARC, whether it is the Joint Parliamentary Group, major financial groups and powerful families, the military, and even the Security Bureau were all overpowered by them in terms of authority level. Over time, this group of people naturally became a veritable human superior. Anyone who can enter the institute can be regarded as a genius without exception. So-called geniuses, 9.5 out of 10 will have some characteristics of being arrogant and arrogant. Coupled with almost top-level authority and material conditions, these 2 factors add up. Together, it has become the current situation, in the eyes of the people at the institute, ordinary people on the Ark, even including the eldest lady of the consortium like Sophia Soma, have no human rights at all. To them, the entire Ark was like a giant livestock farm, and the people on board were like livestock raised and ready to be slaughtered at any time. To put it bluntly, as the Institute's power continues to expand, its members have gradually lost their humanity. Even those who are not bad in nature will gradually be assimilated by the environment after joining this organization. For example, 2 high-achieving students graduated in the same year and joined the biomedical department of the institute together. One of them had an extremely utilitarian character. He began to participate in human experiments soon after joining the institute, and believed that as long as he can obtain corresponding academic achievements, the sacrifice of those experimental subjects is worth it. Another person who is unwilling to deal with these experimental subjects will be gradually marginalized. Not only will he be unable to obtain research results, but his mentor will gradually alienate him. He will have no companions, no resources, and those who can only rely on human bodies. Only through experiments can valuable data be obtained. No matter how talented the student is, he will only be forgotten by everyone in the end. This is particularly prominent in the biomedical department. According to the data Kaylan found using the Crisis Management Department's authority, their department alone consumes thousands of experimental subjects every year. There are many experimental subjects like this, some are criminals, some are arrested exiles, and some are people who owe huge debts and are unable to repay, but not only this kind of scum, there are also many experimental subjects who are not criminals at all. Anyone who makes mistakes is like those in the psychokinetic living experiment group. Many of them are elite soldiers from the army. Regardless of whether they are guilty or innocent, the researchers in charge of the experimental subjects will not tell them the true purpose and consequences of the experiment, and no matter whether the experiment succeeds or fails, less than 30% of these people will eventually leave the experimental base. Asano Akira was already very lucky, because in their project, the institute had many soldiers from the military seconded. Due to the pressure from the military, they did not deal with failures like him in the end, but instead other experimental subjects who have no background will most likely be injected with a tube of sedative after the experiment is over, and then packaged and thrown into the incinerator. As for the experimental subjects who made major breakthroughs, the fate was even worse. In the underground ice house of the institute, Kaylan saw at least hundreds of human bodies soaked in various solutions, some a complete person, and some are a certain part or organ of the human body. If this kind of thing happened in the old era, then everyone in the institute would probably be executed for crimes against humanity, but on the Ark, regular law enforcement agencies have no power to try them at all. Scientific progress does require sacrifice, but this is absolutely no reason to treat human life as trivial. Perhaps, taking advantage of this accident, the Immortal Crew Association should reorganize the institute. Kaylan thought in his heart. At least, if the development continues at the previous pace, this group of people will soon become that's what a heretical sect looks like. With the sound of the chainsaw engine, the robot cut off a large piece of turf soaked with blood, and then took out a new one from the warehouse to lay it on, except for the 2 bullet casings that Kaylan picked up and put into his pocket. All traces were poured into the garbage disposal and smashed to pieces by sharp blades. Kaylan knew in his heart that it would be useless to kill these 2 researchers, or even Renee herself. The only one who had the ability to change everything was the aloof undead crew member. He is just a chess piece now, and if he wants to become a chess player, he must first become a member of the crew association. He didn't know if the chess player was also tied with silk threads used to control the puppet, but at least he had to jump out of the current chessboard first. Kaylan turned around and saw Zofia and Zeloto standing at the door, looking at him. "I'm just giving that guy a heads up," Kaylan said. "I know, but are they too impulsive? After all, they are from the Institute," Zofia said with some worry. "I'm afraid the Institute can't protect itself now. You don't have to worry about them coming back to retaliate against you and the Soma family." As for herself and the hunting god hunting group, Kaylan didn't mention it at all. Zofia is a smart woman, and since Kaylan was selected as the person in charge of Agunakota, she can be sure, "My fiancé has received an extremely terrifying help at some point, and the authority of this help seems to be far above the research institute. Otherwise, for an S-class ruin that has hardly been developed, and a treasure that is the envy of almost every force, why would its development rights fall to a young hunter with no identity background?" The achievements of the hunting god hunting group after its establishment can indeed be regarded as brilliant, and the family represented by his surname is indeed an existence that is out of reach for ordinary people, but even if the 2 are added together, in front of an S-class ruins, that is far from enough. What's more, this S-class ruins itself is an ancient battleship from an alien civilization. This is not an immovable city ruins, but a super weapon with terrifying power. Anyone who masters this weapon will instantly have the capital to fight against the entire Ark. Without that terrifying help, Kaylan would never have climbed to this position. Although she doesn't know about the existence of the undead crew yet, as one of the heirs of the Soma family, she will know something about this highest authority hidden in the shadows. A force like the Soma family can already be regarded as the middle and upper reaches of the powerful class. In addition to the clan leader knowing the existence of the Undead Crew Association, the clan leader's right-hand man and successor usually also know some information. These messages are usually very obscure, but it's enough to make people frightened to think about it. Zofia has always known that the United Parliamentary Group does not actually have 100% autonomy. They are more like a group of agents, but as for who they act as agents, she can't tell clearly. In the early years, she thought that the family forces behind the congressmen were the decision-makers who could truly dominate the parliamentary group. However, as she grew older, she came into contact with more and more things, and she learned more about the inside story. More and more, she gradually began to realize that things did not seem to be what she thought at first. If those congressmen really represent the forces behind them, then the entire management of ARC may become a mess. Everyone wants to gain benefits for their own power, so the parliamentary group will inevitably be filled with overt and covert struggles. Even the fight for the successor within the Soma family is so explosive, let alone the game between families. But the fact is exactly the opposite. Many times, the parliamentary group is the one that checks and balances various power organizations. And those major events that need to be decided by the parliamentary group will hardly take more than a day to make decisions. If it is left in the old era, it would take at least several months just to hold meetings and argue. The joint parliamentary group's work efficiency is simply terrifying, but it is precisely for this reason that ARC can gain a foothold on Alpha Star. The joint parliamentary group gave Zofia the feeling that it was not like a countermeasure organization composed of representatives elected by multiple forces, but more like a one-word hall full of authoritarianism. In addition, the joint parliamentary group did not have 100% guarantee. With the news of autonomy, Zofia finally came to the conclusion, above the parliamentary group, there is a power structure hidden by ordinary people. First of all, this authority will definitely not be the mastermind of ARC. Although the mastermind has a high level of authority, people will never be willing to let the machine's authority exceed themselves. Even if the positions of everyone in the parliamentary group are not consistent, if they plan to start a war, the first thing they must do is to unite and deprive the mastermind of its highest authority. This authority can only be composed of people. Yes, Zofia nodded and asked, the whole ship is blocked, it must be something happened at the institute, right? Did you get the news from your family? Kaylan was a little surprised. Logically speaking, the information blockade on the mimetic infection incident was comprehensive. Even the powerful people on the ARC would have difficulty obtaining relevant information. After all, memes are spread through information. The more people know about it, the greater the harm it will do. Even if the Crisis Management Department had planned to involve civil society organizations in the later cleanup and reconstruction work, the news should not have spread so quickly. No, it's the two researchers, Zofia replied. They had a call with Dr. Renee not long ago, and they mentioned that a serious accident had occurred at the Institute's headquarters, but the specific accident seemed to be unclear. Even they themselves don't know. Did they call in front of you? Kaylan was a little stunned. Are these guys so big-hearted? No, before the call, they specially selected a soundproof room and turned on various anti-eavesdropping devices, but these things seem to be of no use to Ze-Logo, Zofia said. Oh, I almost forgot, there is this great god next to Zofia. Kaylan said in his heart, and couldn't help but take another look at Ze-Logo. What did they say? The one named Renee seemed to be in a hurry to return to the ARC. She mentioned that the accident was related to one of her colleagues. Her colleague's research had made breakthrough progress. Although the consequences were catastrophic, she wants to know the specific experimental data, Ze-Logo said immediately. She asked the two researchers to be optimistic about Miss Soma, and specifically mentioned that if you come to see Miss Soma, she will find a way to use drugs on the two of you. Ze-Logo didn't say what kind of medicine they were using. It was probably because they didn't mention it in their original conversation, but even so, Kaylan could guess what they wanted to use. Forget it, let's not mention them, Kaylan said. Someone will handle those things for me. Is it that group of people? Zofia looked at Kaylan and asked in a low voice. Which group of people? Kaylan originally thought that Sophia was asking someone from the Security Bureau or the Crisis Management Department, but after meeting her eyes, he realized that this was not what the other party wanted to ask at all. "The people who chose you," Sophia said. Yes, Kaylan nodded without hesitation. "It's their fault that they didn't take care of this matter. They should take responsibility. I seem to have won the first prize." Sophia looked at Kaylan and couldn't help but sigh. "I don't know if it's the first prize. I only know that similar troubles may be inevitable in the future." Kaylan knelt down and held up Sophia's foot with the anklet, and there was a flash of blood between his fingers. Then, the anklet forged from a special alloy split into two and fell to the ground. "The more people are afraid of trouble, the easier it is for trouble to come to their door." Sophia put her hands on Ian's shoulders and said, "My grandfather told me this. P.S. Thanks to Shiakingchen for the 2,000 starting coins, thanks to 340ml for the 150 starting coins, thanks to Ziokai for the 100 starting coins. P.P.S. Regarding the reader group, I have something to explain to you. I had a group that disappeared yesterday. It was a mobile game group. I have been a member for 6 or 7 years, and everyone in the group is familiar with it. Although we got together because of the game, it has essentially become a group of friends and relatives. There are only a few dozen people in the group on weekdays. Everyone will press Z and GHS from time to time, and nothing has ever happened. As a result, a new person joined the group yesterday. Not long after he joined, the group was gone, and even the group owner's account was gone, and even all TX-related games and other businesses, that account probably couldn't be logged in. So I can't help but feel a little lucky that despite having hit 3 reader groups in a row, my QQ account hasn't been blocked yet. In the past, every time there was a group explosion or innovation group, they would be strictly controlled for a while, and then they would gradually relax, but now it seems that this may not work. After all, my writer account is bound to QQ. If my QQ is gone, I won't even be able to enter the writer backend. I initially planned to transfer the group owner, but failed after several attempts. I don't know why. There is no other way. From today on, the group will begin to implement long-term strict management. In order to write this book smoothly, I beg all group members to let me go. As for the VIP welfare group promised to everyone before, I am afraid it will be postponed indefinitely. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chenmi-san. Chapter 594. What the old man said makes sense. Kaylan responded while feeling the smooth and delicate touch in his hands. He couldn't help but take a closer look at this little foot that was like a work of art, and then pinched it subconsciously. The force was neither light nor heavy, but it still left a few light red marks on the surface of the snow-white skin. Suddenly, a sweet cry came from above the head. Sophia's face felt slightly hot. She wanted to pull her foot away from Ian's hand, but found that she couldn't do it. Why is this man so strong? He wouldn't want to, at this time. She struggled internally and simply closed her eyes, no longer resisting. Kaylan looked at the eldest lady's expression from the corner of his vision. He saw that her eyes were lightly closed, her long eyelashes were fluttering from time to time, and there was a slight blush on her cheeks. Her skin color is very fair, so even if her face is only a little red, she still looks very conspicuous. Kaylan suddenly felt that some of what that guy said was not completely unreasonable. After the series of events ended, Kaylan felt an indescribable feeling of fatigue in his heart for no reason, and he suddenly wanted to relax completely. There are many ways to relax: playing games, watching movies, working out, eating a big meal, and... Does it hurt you? Kaylan let go of his hand and stood up and asked. No. Although Kaylan had already stood up, Sophia's hands were still on his shoulders. Considering her height, this action was not strenuous and she didn't even need to tiptoe. Looking at the face so close, Kaylan felt waves of warm breath blowing on his face. The strange feeling was difficult to describe in words. 200 doses of Thunder Beast medicine might be beneficial to him now. It has no effect, but this desire aroused through one's own subjective consciousness is another matter. The threat from the Institute has been eliminated, but the attitude of the Undead Crew Association is relatively ambiguous, but in any case, the mimetic infection incident has obviously sounded the alarm for them, even if some people still have their own hearts in their hearts. His little abacus should be restrained a lot in the days to come. Kaylan will never believe the statement that if he fails, the immortal crew will run away with the gene pool. They definitely have other back UPS, but no matter how many back UPS they have, the Institute's losses are real. It is no exaggeration to say that this incident has already damaged the foundation of ARC and humanity. It will take at least a few years, if not more, for the Institute to return to the state it was in before the incident. As the saying goes, sailing against the current, if you don't advance, you will retreat. For ARC, even a stagnation period of only a few years is very dangerous, especially when there is an unstable factor such as a heretical sect outside that is completely hostile. These things should be left to the people of the Undead Crew to worry about. Kaylan closed his eyes hard and temporarily pushed these messy thoughts to the back of his mind. Now, he only had one thought in his mind. Eat, drop, her. Kaylan took a deep breath, lifted Sophia's body horizontally, and walked quickly towards the stairs. Many things do not actually require a special opportunity. Just like now, Sophia buried her head on Ian's shoulder and wrapped her hands around his neck, looking extremely submissive. Everything that happened next was natural. It just fell into place. But what made Kaylan a little speechless was that just as he was carrying the beauty and preparing to go upstairs, there was a sound of light footsteps behind him. At this moment, Ze-Lugo also followed. In Ian's mind, the most correct thing to do at this time is to let go of Sophia and find a way to distract Ze-Lugo's attention. As for that matter, at worst, he will find another good opportunity in the future, but for some reason, he is now. But she didn't want to let go of this gentle body in her arms at all. The girl followed him until he reached the bottom step of the stairs before stopping. Kaylan glared at her with the 4 characters "No upstairs" written all over it. The Sanwua girl's face still had no obvious expression, but there was a trace of grievance in her eyes. "Can I watch it?" she thought for a while and asked. Obviously, she knew what Kaylan and the others were going to do next. Ze-Lugo has already understood this kind of knowledge very thoroughly through literature, but she has never witnessed it with her own eyes in reality. Especially after Ian's computer was hacked by the crew, he deleted the resources stored in the hard drive. As a result, the girl had no chance to watch actual combat scenes. No, Kaylan flatly refused. "Then can I join?" Ze-Lugo asked a more exciting question. This is even worse. Kaylan suddenly felt that there seemed to be some problem with the way he educated Ze-Lugo. Ze-Lugo nodded, turned, and walked towards the corridor on the right, which is connected to the study room of the villa, and is also the place where Ze-Lugo spends most time in the eldest lady's house. She shouldn't be able to use her ability to spy, right? Just when Kaylan was thinking this, Sophia suddenly reached out her hand and pinched his chest lightly. This action seemed to urge him. Kaylan glanced at her and saw that the blush on the eldest lady's face had spread down her neck. Kaylan bit her lip hard, stopped thinking about Ze-Lugo, and pushed open the ajar door of the bedroom with her knees. I don't know how many words have been abridged here. At the same time, Fleet Zero. Why was my return application not approved? Dr. Renee stared at the agent blocking the hangar door and asked angrily. She looked like a lioness with exploded hair at the moment. As for the young agent who looked at the file box she was holding out of the corner of his eye from time to time, he always felt that the box made of aviation-grade aluminum alloy would be stuck in his face in the next second. "This is a requirement from above," the young agent said with a grimace. "I have no authority to let you return to the Ark. Not only you, but any member of the Institute is prohibited from returning to the headquarters." "Above? Which one is it?" "The director of your security bureau or the joint parliamentary group?" Dr. Renee continued to ask. Behind her, there were several researchers in white coats and a dozen Marines on the side. There was a tense confrontation. "I'm just following the order. Doctor, please don't make things difficult for me anymore," the young agent said. "But the problem is that I can't contact the headquarters of the Institute at all now. Not even the Joint Parliamentary Group has rejected my communication request. I have something very urgent now. Please tell me what I should do." "Who are you looking for?" Dr. Renee said very quickly. "You must also know that something happened at the Institute headquarters. I went back this time just to rescue precious experimental data. Every second you stop me, it's causing massive losses to ARC. Can you afford this responsibility?" "I'm just executing the order," the young agent repeated again. "Only the team leader can contact the person above who issued the order." "What about your team leader?" Dr. Renee suppressed her anger. "Let him come out." Team leader, he has been missing for 2 days," the young agent complained inwardly. If Team Leader Cheng had not disappeared, it would not be his turn to deal with this situation now. The device clearly showed Team Leader Cheng he was still on the battleship, but the other agents in the team couldn't find him at all. They had searched every place they could find on the entire battleship. Except for those areas where they did not have enough authority to enter, they had searched every corner at least 3 times. Not to mention the Chengdong people, even not a shadow was seen. Several agents finally concluded that Team Leader Cheng must be on a secret mission whose whereabouts cannot be revealed, and that this mission was most likely related to Chief Kailan, because not only was Chengdong missing, even that important figure disappeared. For the Security Bureau, this kind of thing is not uncommon, so it is impossible for them to bypass the team leader and ask their superiors because of this. Even if they did, they would most likely not get a reply. "Since I don't want you to know about this matter, it means that your authority level is not high enough to know about it." This is one of the instructor's instructions that they have memorized on the first day of employment. They are just the most basic field agents, and they are very self-aware about the extent of their authority. Don't say what you shouldn't say, don't ask what you shouldn't ask. The disappearance of team leader Cheng Dong did not cause any ripples in the 11th Field Team. After it was determined that the team leader was following Kailan on a special mission, several agents from the 11th Field Team returned to their original posts tacitly. To put it bluntly, even if team leader Cheng did encounter an accident, the people above would go beyond the team leader to inform them. However, a day later, what they were waiting for was not news from team leader Cheng, but an order issued from the Security Bureau headquarters at a higher level. All personnel affiliated with the Research Institute on Fleet Zero are prohibited from returning to the Ark. At the same time, all research projects are suspended and personnel are on standby, waiting for follow-up instructions. The entire content of the order only goes so far, and the people above didn't even disclose the reason, but it doesn't matter. Anyway, as long as the source of the order has no mission, these agents will resolutely carry it out. So that things have developed into the current situation. "Missing," Dr. Renee's voice couldn't help but raise a few pitches. "Are you hiding on purpose?" In order to prevent us from going back, the Security Bureau really didn't even have the nerve to do this. They even resorted to such tricks. "He is really missing. My colleagues and I don't know the whereabouts of Team Leader Cheng," the young agent replied. It was impossible to tell someone like Dr. Renee about carrying out a secret mission. "I can only insist that it is missing. If I remember correctly, all of you field agents should have subcutaneously implanted positioning systems provided by the equipment department, right? Bring your positioning device over here," Dr. Renee ordered. "You have no right to give me orders," the young agent flatly refused. At this time, several other agents from the 11th Field Team also received the news and rushed to the hangar. A total of 8 Security Bureau agents, together with a dozen Marines on the battleship, surrounded this group of white coats. Although they did not draw guns, they had non-lethal weapons such as riot shields and electric batons. The equipment is already in hand. According to regulations, in this case, if a conflict breaks out between the two parties, they are qualified to take action against the people of the Institute. Of course, the premise is that a conflict breaks out, and the other party has to take action first. If it is the Security Bureau and the Marines who take action first, then the situation will be very unfavorable to them when they are held accountable. The young agent who had previously negotiated with Dr. Rene signaled with his eyes to his colleagues who came to support him. The agents immediately ran behind him, raised their riot shields, and together with the Marines, used the shield wall. The entrance to the hangar was tightly blocked by a human wall. Fortunately, your support was timely. The young agent breathed a sigh of relief, took a few steps back, and stood together with his colleagues. If the opponent doesn't take action and just wants to forcefully rush into the hangar, just use a shield to block them. These researchers are at a disadvantage both in terms of numbers and personal physical fitness. When a few Marines come out, they can knock down these white coats who have been lacking exercise all year round. Lao Bei, try to contact the team leader again and see if you can get in touch. The agent turned to the colleague next to him and said, if they are unwilling to go back, things may end badly. The people in the Institute are not enemies. Not only that, from the perspective of Ark and all mankind, each of them can be regarded as a very valuable asset. If possible, he still wants to avoid conflicts as much as possible. But just when the agent named Lao Bei was trying to contact Cheng Dong, a researcher standing behind Dr. Rene suddenly took out a metal can from his white coat and threw it towards the shield wall. P.S. Regarding the abridged part, actually, it was not abridged. I didn't write it at all. As everyone knows, I am an upright person and never lie. In fact, Kaylan and the eldest lady are going to play this year's best game of the year. 2 people, believe it or not. This is a work for all ages, so there will naturally be no discordant content. Oh, by the way, there may be sharp-eyed or relatively leisurely readers who will find that in addition to the original reader group that can be added with 500 fan points, there is also a meal adding group under the introduction. As for what the meal adding group is for, of course it is come for extra food. All I can say is that I understand everything. The current entry threshold for meal adding groups is tentatively set at 5,000 fan points. After that, some extra plots, settings and other things I wrote will be thrown into the add-on group. Maybe, probably, maybe there will be a part of the plot where Kaylan and the eldest lady play online games. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chen-Mi-san. Chapter 595. Bang. The silver metal tube exploded instantly after hitting the transparent anti-riot shield. The liquid in it splashed out in all directions. At the same time, a large amount of white water mist rose up, killing the Marines closest to the explosion location. It was packed in. Within 2 seconds, shrill screams rang out in the white mist. Quick, stay away from the white mist, the young agent shouted. The surrounding soldiers immediately retreated upon hearing the sound. A huge gap immediately appeared in the shield wall. A researcher seized the opportunity and rushed forward, diving into the white mist. Middle. However, he failed to run out from the other side of the white mist. Not only that, the screams of the soldiers before gradually became fainter until they disappeared completely. What did you throw away? The young agent asked sharply towards Dr. Rene and others. However, the other party did not give an answer, but just stared at the white mist. The white mist filled the air for more than 10 seconds before dissipating. The few soldiers affected and even the researcher who rushed into the white mist fell to the ground. Their clothes, skin, and muscles were all damaged. It has been corroded to the point of being riddled with holes, and the white bones are clearly visible. What did you throw just now? Dr. Rene frowned and asked the researcher behind her who had just thrown the metal can. It's an extract from the pharyngeal glands of the SP variant number 6, the researcher immediately replied. Doctor, you asked me to prepare it, saying that if we are trapped, we can use it to break through the barrier. But what I asked you to prepare was a diluted extract, and I didn't ask you to throw it directly into the crowd. Dr. Renee could completely feel the murderous looks coming from the other side. These people affected by the white mist were obviously already dead, and they did not even need to be sent to the medical cabin for rescue. No one expected that the conflict would escalate to this level just after it broke out. 6 lives is not a big deal to the Institute, but the problem is that 5 of the 6 lives were Marines on the battleships of Fleet Zero, and they did not die as experimental subjects, but was killed by a disobedient researcher during the execution of the mission. The nature of this matter suddenly became different. I have already diluted it. The researcher defended, but I didn't know that this thing would be so powerful. What diluent did you use? Renee was slightly startled, as if she had thought of something. Yes, it's special number 4 universal diluent. In previous experiments, wasn't this reagent used to dilute the body fluids of the seat of corrosion? Did you forget that special number 4 diluent cannot come into contact with oxygen? Renee asked. In fact, there was nothing wrong with this researcher's operation. He used special number 4 diluent to dilute the mutant pharyngeal glands. Body extraction fluid is indeed the most commonly used and correct method in experiments. Special number 4 diluent can keep the body fluids of the erosion seed in a very stable state. Of course, this premise is that during the entire process, no contact with oxygen. It's okay to put a few drops on the glass slide with a dropper, but if you spill it, the diluent that is fully mixed with oxygen will react violently, explode in a small area, and evaporate quickly. While the two were talking, the remaining Marines rushed up with red eyes. They raised their sticks and lowered their hands, and the 2 researchers were directly put down to the ground. These soldiers showed no mercy at all. Each stick was swung down with all their strength. One unlucky guy was hit in the head, and his skull was opened halfway. The bright red blood flowed directly from between the hair. Welling up, this kind of injury would definitely be fatal if not treated in time, but the soldiers turned a blind eye and kicked him to the ground and stepped on him. It's over, these soldiers are out of control. The young agent saw the remaining Marines rushing towards the researchers, and suddenly shouted something bad in his heart. Although someone died, judging from the opponent's behavior, this was actually a manslaughter incident, but now, these red-eyed Marines were rushing to take the opponent's life. If they were not stopped, these institutes would probably be beaten to death. Wait a minute. Everyone, calm down first. Stop. Everyone, stop. He stretched out his hand to catch a Marine who rushed past him, but the latter broke away and pushed him with his backhand. The opponent used a lot of force. As a 2-level enhanced person, he staggered back 2 steps before regaining his balance. He raised his head and was about to yell at the opponent to stop him, but he found the blood-red eyes of the Marine. It was actually filled with tears. That bastard killed our captain, the Marine yelled at the young agent at the top of his lungs. Half of the lives of our team were saved by our captain. Even if I have to be shot afterwards, we have to make these guys in white coats pay for our captain's life. Doctor. The researcher who got into trouble kept moving his eyes on Renee and the soldiers who were rushing over. He stepped back with a nervous look on his face, and murmured while lifting his legs. These soldiers seem to want to kill us. Isn't that because of the good things you did? Renee glared at him. Her hand had already reached into her white coat and held a cold hard object. How about handing him over? Another researcher looked at the guy who caused the trouble with a look of hatred on his face. You can't be the reason why all of us are involved. Don't. The researcher immediately shook his head and said, don't hand me over, and again, look at the appearance of those soldiers, they are obviously unreasonable. The agents of the Security Bureau did not participate in the conflict. On the contrary, they initially planned to stop the Marines, but the latter almost beat them up as well. What he said makes sense. Even if we send him out now, those soldiers will not let the others go, Renee said coldly. What should we do? Anyway, the conflict has escalated, let's just grab a transport plane and fly back to the Ark. As long as we can get Professor Smith's research data before we are arrested, someone will naturally come to protect us. Dr. Renee lowered her voice. Said the voice. How to grab it? We can't even break into the hangar. As soon as the researcher finished speaking, a tall Marine rushed to him, grabbed his collar, and raised the stick still stained with blood in his hand. Bang! There was a gunshot and the whole place was silent. The tall Marine looked at the gun hole on his chest with some disbelief, and then looked at Dr. Renee, who was holding a pistol with a wisp of smoke coming out of the muzzle. His lips wriggled slightly. But in the end, he couldn't say anything and fell down on his back. The other two researchers looked at Dr. Renee blankly. Even if the conflict had reached this point, they never thought that Dr. Renee would actually pull out the gun. The Marine was shot in the left chest, the bullet passed directly through his heart and lungs, and he died on the spot. At this point, both parties have completely lost any room for return. Before the opponent could react, Renee turned her gun again, placed it on the two Marines blocking the road, and ran towards the hangar. If you don't want to die, just follow, she said these words to the two remaining researchers who were still standing. The two looked at each other and quickly chased after Dr. Renee. At this time, the agents and Marines of the Security Bureau realized that the other party chose to shoot and actually wanted to rob a transport plane. Is this woman crazy? The young agent who temporarily replaced Cheng Dong cursed F***ck crazily in his heart. From the moment Dr. Renee fired, these people were already enemies to them, and there was no problem even if they were killed directly. However, whether they are agents of the Security Bureau or these Marines, they carry non-lethal weapons such as riot shields and electric batons. Not to mention firearms, they couldn't even bring out a taser. According to the regulations of the fleet, for the sake of safety, personnel on the ship are not allowed to carry firearms and ammunition unless necessary. All firearms are locked in gun cabinets. Only when tasks requiring the use of firearms are issued, soldiers only then can we get the password to open the cabinet. Explanation: because warships often need to perform some difficult maneuvers in combat situations, if the weapons and ammunition carried by the ship's personnel can easily cause misfire due to collision, even if the safety is turned off, it may not guarantee that no accident will occur. In addition, in the combat environment on Planet Alpha, except for airborne operations or ship invasion, Marines do not need to use guns, so Ark's major fleets have this requirement. The nearest gun cabinet is more than 100 meters away from the hangar entrance. Before the agents of the Security Bureau took action, the Marines had already divided into two groups in a tacit understanding. One group ran towards the gun cabinet 100 meters away, while the other group rushed towards Dr. Renee and the others, trying to intercept them. Boom! Boom! Two more shots were fired. One shot was blocked by the riot shield, and the other shot opened the skull of the shield holder. No one knew that the situation would develop to this extent before rushing to the hangar. So that most Marines did not wear heavy helmets and body armor at all. Bang! Another shot hit the calf of another Marine. The man's feet immediately softened and he fell heavily to the ground. Dr. Renee did not shoot the fallen soldier, but put the pistol into the hand of the researcher who threw the metal can, and ordered, "You come to the rear." I am here to break up the rear." The researcher was stunned for a moment, but before he could refuse, another Marine pounced on him. Bah! 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 In desperation, he raised his pistol and fired 3 shots. One of the shots just missed the edge of the shield and flew past, penetrating the Marine's abdomen. "Doctor, wait for me," the man turned around and shouted in panic, but at this time, the Marines with guns had already rushed over. They didn't waste any time talking, just raised their guns and shot, immediately causing a conflict. The culprit was sieved. Dr. Renee and another researcher seized this opportunity and got into a military transport aircraft parked at the edge of the hangar, with the door open and having just completed maintenance. When the gunfire rang out, the ground crew in the hangar had already hid far away, so no one could stop them from boarding the plane. This is a Wren-class light military transport aircraft. This model has been in service in the military system for more than 35 years. Not to mention pilots, many ground staff and even Marines will fly this model of aircraft, especially after the latest AI-assisted operating system has been upgraded in recent years. A person who has never flown an airplane can easily fly it into the sky. Dr. Renee and the researcher sat down in the front and passenger seats respectively. The one-button startup module saved them at least 30 seconds. As for the routine inspection before takeoff, they were completely omitted. Relying on the special authority of the researcher, Dr. Renee quickly unlocked the aircraft's lock mode and closed the tail door. The bullets fired by the Marines could only scratch out stars on the outer armor of the aircraft. A few sparks, but they couldn't penetrate the fuselage at all. The external exit of the hangar is closed, and it is impossible for the console to let us through. What should we do? The researcher in the passenger seat said anxiously. Dr. Renee had already started the engine at this time, and the transport plane started gradually accelerating. If they could not open the hangar exit, they would hit the lift door panel in 10 seconds. Blow it up. Dr. Renee opened a red protective cover with a ferocious expression and put her finger on the button under the protective cover. Although it is a transport aircraft, the Wren is also equipped with certain support and self-defense weapons, including 2 lightweight guided missiles mounted under the wings. Boom! Amidst the violent explosion, the exit lift gate connected to runway 3 was suddenly torn open, a hole large enough for the Wren to pass through. The strong air wave immediately lifted the Marines chasing after them. Flying up. The tail thruster of the Wren sprayed out flames several meters long, and the entire aircraft suddenly accelerated and flew out of the hole. At this moment, the alarm sounded throughout the entire Zero fleet. Damn! We're locked. Doctor! We're locked by the battleship's weapons. Along with the frantic warning sound, the researcher in the co-pilot's seat felt like he was going crazy. He had known things would turn out like this. It's better to run back from the beginning. As long as you don't get caught by those out-of-control Marines, maybe you won't be injured. But now, does Renee, a crazy woman, want to challenge an entire fleet with a transport plane? I am Dr. Renee. There is very important research information on the transport plane. Renee grabbed the walkie-talkie and said loudly in the fleet communication channel, I repeat, there is very important research information on the transport plane. Our mission it is to protect the research data and safely return it to the ARC headquarters. Any unit is strictly prohibited from firing at me. But her words did not receive a response. Instead, the locked warning sounded in her ears more frequently. Dr. Renee suddenly fell silent. She bit her lips and pushed the accelerator to the maximum. At the same time, a solid beam of light caught up from behind and instantly hit the rear of the transport plane. Boom! Renee felt the world spin for a while, knocked her head on the control panel above, and then lost consciousness. I don't know how much time passed, but Renee woke up from the severe pain all over her body. She raised her head and found that the screens above were shattered into spider webs, and the smell of burnt circuit boards kept pouring into her nostrils. Lizuan, she just realized that the transport plane was hit and they crashed. She was lucky. Although the ejection mount failed to activate, the full coverage airbag saved her life. As for the researcher in the passenger seat, she was not so lucky. A broken steel yang passed through his chest and nailed his body to the seat. Have to, hurry up, ahem, leave. Renee knew that it wouldn't take long for the military to find the wreckage of the transport plane, and by then, everything would be too late. I'm afraid Fang Zhou can't go back. She doesn't know where she should go, but at least she can't be caught by the military. Dragging her scarred body, she climbed out of the wreckage of the transport plane on her hands and knees, but when she looked up, she saw a pair of black boots appearing in front of her eyes. It was a tall and thin man wearing a sand-colored cloak. He wore a black protective mask on his face and a pair of narrow eyes, looking at her through the mirror of the goggles with a half smile. "Dr. Renee, I think that ARC's Research Institute may not be able to utilize all of your talents." The man squatted down and looked down at Renee's eyes. "If possible, I hope to invite you to join a great project career. P.S. Thanks to KVX for the 1,400 starting coins, thanks to Chienquij for the 500 starting coins. P.P.S. A lot of people joined the meal adding group overnight as expected. LSP's power of action should not be underestimated. As an official preview, the game plot should be updated on Sunday. Writing and writing, referring to creating a new folder. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chen San. Chapter 596. Great, cause. You are not from ARC. Who are you? Dr. Renee asked alertly. Don't you already know the answer in your heart? The other party reached out and pinched Dr. Renee's mandible with the index finger and thumb of his right hand. His hand was so strong that Dr. Renee once suspected that his mandible was. It's not like he will be crushed to pieces by the other party. Yes, I have indeed guessed the answer, Renee thought in her heart. On this planet, besides ARC, which other human force can accept such a former senior researcher who committed a serious crime? Or to simplify the question even more, which other human force in the wilderness is qualified to challenge ARC? A pile of scattered exiles is obviously not the correct answer to this question, so that leaves only the last option. Heretical sect. Are you a prophet? Dr. Renee asked with some difficulty. Because her chin was still held in the other person's hand, her voice seemed a little unclear. That's right. The two fingers holding Dr. Renee's chin moved up slightly and stuck on both sides of her cheeks. With a little force, Dr. Renee was forced to open her mouth into an O shape. The so-called prophet is just a nickname. The other party's tone seemed to be sighing or mocking, and he slowly shook his head. I am just his agent in this world, and I am the extension of my will, and it is precisely because of his guidance that I can get ahead of those ignorant people and find you. The prophet switched to pinching Dr. Renee's cheek with his middle finger and thumb, and his index finger inserted into Dr. Renee's forced open mouth. Dr. Renee only heard a squeak. Something seemed to tear open the leather gloves on the opponent's hands and came out from the tip of the index finger. The next second, Dr. Renee felt something slippery and squirming sliding down her throat. After doing all this, the prophet finally let go of his hand and stood up. He took a few steps back and looked at Dr. Renee lying on the ground with interest. Ahem, what did you feed me? Ahem, what did you feed me? Dr. Renee stuck her hands around her throat, trying to choke out the thing, but to no avail. The thing was alive. With a slender body and a layer of sticky secretions on the surface, just like a slippery loach. Dr. Renee was almost suffocating herself, but it still passed through her throat and fell into her belly. Thinking of the touch on her throat, Dr. Renee couldn't help but think of a special creature created by the Alpha civilization, and her face suddenly turned pale. Is it a flesh-eating worm? If the container in which the eroded seed is parasitic still has a glimmer of hope, then the host of the flesh-eating worm basically has only one ending left, being used as nourishment by the larvae, bit by bit, from the inside out. Chew clean in the field. Even in the most well-equipped laboratory of the Institute, not a single parasitized person can survive. The flesh-eating worm's ability to sense danger is far more sensitive than that of the corrosive seed, and it can even detect what is happening in the host's brain. Feelings of fear and despair, as long as the situation is slightly wrong, it will immediately enter the ripening period, sucking out the host's flesh and blood in a very short period of time, and breaking out of the body. Within heretical sects, being implanted with the larvae of flesh-eating worms is a very severe punishment, although the prophet will promise these sinners that if they can make enough merit, they will send messengers to remove the larvae from their bodies. Flesh-eating worms and relieve their pain, but in fact this sentence is very misleading. Flesh-eating worms that have completed parasitism cannot be removed. The prophet's messenger will only calculate the time when the larvae mature and remove them. Just take away the emerging adults. As for the life and death of the host, it has nothing to do with them. Of course, literally speaking, the prophet did not lie to these people. The flesh-eating worms in their bodies were indeed taken away, and they would no longer bear the pain of being bitten by the worms. As a dead person, I will never feel any pain again. Although Dr. Renee has not seen with her own eyes the appearance of the tortured members of heretical sects before they die, but she can see the miserable conditions of those who are used as feed in the flesh-eating worm artificial breeding base within the institute. Just too much. Some things give people completely different feelings when they happen to others than when they happen to themselves. Dr. Renee couldn't help but start to recall those scenes and imagine what it would be like if the pain endured by those people was transferred to herself. Such a feeling. Her breathing suddenly became rapid, and she didn't know whether it was due to psychological effects or other reasons. She felt bursts of pain in her lower abdomen, and her limbs began to tremble involuntarily. Flemish-eating worms. Tisk, tisk, tisk. The prophet shook his head again. This is a gift from the great God. How can you compare it with a defective product like flesh-eating worms made by blasphemers? A gift from the great God. The pain in her abdomen has turned into unbearable cramping pain. Thin beads of sweat seeped out from Dr. Renee's face. She wanted to reach into the pocket on the inside of her white coat. In her pocket, there were some emergency medicines that she carried with her, which naturally included analgesic injections, which are very common injections on the battlefield. She felt that if she didn't give herself an injection, she might really be killed. Dying in agony. However, Dr. Renee soon discovered that her body had long been out of control, and the blood vessels under the skin of her limbs were all bulging, looking like big purple earthworms crawling on her body. Blood that was almost black in color slowly overflowed from her nostrils and ears. The prophet of the heretic sect seemed to be leaning over and saying something to herself, but she felt that the other person's voice seemed to come from a very far away place, and she could only hear some vague and ambiguous syllables. As for the specific content of the words, it's impossible to tell the difference at all. Am I going to die? Dr. Renee thought a little desperately. I don't know why, but at this critical moment, she was regretting why Kaylan didn't accept her proposal before. If I were pregnant with that person's child, then Professor Smith's research data would not be so important. I would not be in a hurry to rush back to the Ark, let alone have an affair with the Marines of Fleet Zero. Conflict. Am I really going to die? She felt her consciousness gradually dissipate, and she could no longer feel her body. However, it was precisely because of this state that the original pain that was enough to make her collapse. At this time, it also disappeared along with the disappearance of the body's senses. No, you won't die. The originally ethereal voice suddenly became solid, and the prophet's voice rang directly in her mind. For a moment, Renee seemed to feel her own thoughts connected with the other party. Not only will you not die, but you will also transcend the shackles of the human body and gain power from him. The prophet's lips moved, but the voice was directly transmitted to the mind of Renee, who was in a semi-conscious state. If Renee could still concentrate her consciousness, she would be surprised to find that the other party was speaking the language of the Alpha civilization that they had never been able to decipher. And she seemed to have mastered the ability to understand this language in one breath. At the same time, thousands of kilometers away, Kaylan, who was still thinking about Dr. Renee before she lost consciousness, had just finished an unknown number of rounds of battle. Zofia Soma's private residence, master bedroom. Kaylan sat shirtless on the bed, leaning against a thick pillow filled with genuine goose down. His eyes were slightly dull as he looked at the oil painting hanging on the wall opposite. The name of this oil painting is Lady Godiva on horseback. A beautiful, naked woman is riding on the back of a white horse. However, there is no one on the street, and all the houses have their doors and windows closed. The golden sunlight falls on the woman's white shoulders, seeming to coat the entire scene with a layer of holy light. This is of course not an authentic piece from the old era, but an imitation that is extremely exquisite. The original oil painting was once collected in the Coventry Museum of Great Britain. Unfortunately, the museum and the collections in the museum were accidentally destroyed by a fire caused by a riot. Otherwise, the cultural and artistic value of this painting would be very high. Value, it should also have a place in ARC's art collection warehouse. Although it is an imitation, with current technology, this oil painting can be completely different from the real one. Even the isotope detection method cannot distinguish the authenticity of this oil painting. Of course, it has long been impossible to distinguish an authentic painting. For existing works, this step seems a bit redundant. Lady Godiva on horseback tells a story full of human glory. In order to raise military expenses, a certain Earl of Great Britain decided to impose heavy taxes on the people in his territory, but the Earl's wife is the protagonist of this oil painting, Godiva. Mrs. Deva begged the Earl, hoping to reduce the taxes of the people in her territory. But this move angered the Count, and the two actually made a seemingly absurd bet. The Count proposed that as long as Lady Godiva rode naked through the streets of the city, all the residents in the city without even glancing at her, he agreed to his wife's request. The result was naturally just like what was painted in the oil painting. When the naked Lady Godiva rode her horse onto the street the next day, all the people in the city spontaneously stayed at home, with their doors and windows closed, and the entire street was deserted except for the Countess. Afterwards, the Earl kept his promise and reduced the people's taxes. This story is indeed beautiful, but in K. Ian's opinion, it is more like a legend used to beautify the nobility. The story takes place in the Middle Ages, which is undoubtedly a very dark era in Western human history. In that era, the lives of the people at the bottom were even more despicable than in the interstellar drifting era. This kind of thing is impossible to happen now. In that dark era, it was more like people's wishful expectations for good qualities. Whether human nature is inherently good or human nature is inherently evil has always been a controversial topic, and there is no accurate answer until now. Why would I think about this kind of thing? Kaylan, who was staring at the oil painting, suddenly became excited and let out a long breath. Could it be that this is the legendary sage's time? Kaylan turned his head and looked at the other side of the big bed. A graceful human figure bulged under the soft silk quilt. Kaylan knew that as long as he lifted the quilt, the thrilling beauty would appear in front of his eyes. But somewhere in the dark, there was a voice telling him in his head, if he lifted the quilt at this moment, an unimaginable terrifying force would be unleashed. The horror of this power cannot be described in words. Even the great God who can interfere with countless planes can only be regarded as an ant in front of this power. As long as that power comes, the entire world will collapse in an instant, leaving not even a single residue behind. Kaylan rubbed his face vigorously, but in the end he did not wake up the eldest lady who had fallen into a deep sleep. He got out of bed alone, picked up the clothes and pants scattered on the floor and put them on. He walked to the table. The smart kettle on the table kept a constant temperature. The blue light full of science fiction flashed like breathing on the handle of the kettle. Kaylan poured himself a glass of water and drank it in one gulp. The restlessness in his heart had already calmed down. He leaned against the wall with flocked wallpaper and began to think about the next thing. This trip back to the Ark was originally to deal with the bug of the complete immersion system, but he did not expect that after landing, he was immediately involved in another more serious accident before his butt was even warmed up. Compared with the mimetic crisis, the existence of the bug incident has become so thin that it is indispensable. The secrets and resources possessed by the undead crew have once again exceeded the limits of K. Ian's expectations. He is almost certain, even if you choose to report the bug incident in its entirety, it will not cause any waves. The existence of Zelo may still attract the attention of the Undead Crew Association, but as for Kaylan himself, he always had the feeling that he had been completely seen through by the Undead Crew. Just like when he first met Pope Chiron in the South 16th District, K. Ian's thinking and memory were almost completely transparent in front of the other party's special abilities, but even so, Chiron did not reveal much. Emotion of surprise. This may be because Chiron has become bored with immortality and has lost interest in all things about time, but Kalan cannot rule out that it is because Chiron already knows everything, so when he sees himself in those only when it is secret can it appear so calm. Kalan really wants to know what happened to him, and how all of this is related to the Undead Crew Association. However, whenever he asked about these things, any member of the Crew Association, including Chiron, had a don't say it attitude. Could it be that he really had to wait until he officially joined the Immortal Army? Only when the crew met did they have the opportunity to come into contact with the truth of the matter.